guess that's us starting now. Welcome everyone. This is the show I decided to call Morns and Revelations. Now that we know of Phoenix, the name's quite appropriate. Today we're going to be discussing basically everything that's been uncovered since the embargo lift for Summoner. There's been quite a lot of ups and downs with everything we've been discussing, and today I've got three guests, some very talented Summoner players who've been around for a long time. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, Ellie?
Hi. I go by the name Elevation XX. Been playing FF for 3 years now.
Hey, I'm Eydis. I've been playing Final Fantasy since 3.1. I started with Summoner, and here I am, 3 years later.
I'm Shinryu. I've been playing Summoner since 2.2.
Lots of old school players here, so good stuff, good stuff. Very much looking forward to discussing what we found out so far. Alright, so as mentioned, I think, can everyone see the sheet clearly? Might take a little bit to come up. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, the audio troubles. Alright, let me try and fix that.
It seems like you're pretty quiet, Nemekh.
That's what everyone always seems to say. Probably Discord end. Let me try and fix that. Is this any better? Move a bit closer. We need a Texan to help us. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. Let me check it's the right mic as well. Worst case, I can always switch to my other mic. I don't know, he's probably not with them anymore, Milka. Yes, please look forward to all the audio troubles. Alright. So yes. Embargo lift today, and every job had a lot unveiled, but today we're going to be focusing on Summoner in particular, since that is our job of preference. And to start it all off, I want to talk about a change that I'm quite excited about, especially after 2 years of our GCDs being pretty terrible, and now it's a return to form, and they're even stronger than we had them back in Heavensward, so that's something I'm fairly hyped for. Okay, trying to think, who would like to start?
Sure, I'll go. So as you can see, our base bread and butter GCDs, Ruin and Ruin 2 and Ruin 3 have been increased. With the difference between the two now being 70, and they get like a fester effect, so the more dots you have on the target, the higher damage they do. So Ruin 3 will end up doing 250 with all dots on the target, and Ruin 2 will end up doing 180. And I personally think this is a really good change. One, because our GCDs were really weak the last two expansions. In fact, in Stormblood, in LBChi's runs when that existed, it was actually worth it for the summoner to cast Physic over Ruin 3 because it gave LB. But now our GCDs are back to form, and I think also game design wise, it's really good to have a greater reward for using more Ruin 3s, because previously you could just press Ruin 2 and use that as your only GCD, and yeah, you lose some potency, but it wasn't very much. You lose 20 per Ruin 2. So
it was a very low cost for the extra mobility and peace of mind with mechanics. That was something I definitely missed from Heavensward, where it felt good when you could do some tighter mechanics, just slide casting and hard casting everything. That was something I definitely wished was more of a thing back then, and as mentioned, I'm very excited to seeing GCDs being good again. they listened and they made them good.
Thank God. We've only been waiting 2 years for this, Square Enix.
Oh my god, damn. So glad.
Ruin 3 was sick in Heavensward. I really like Ruin 3 in Heavensward. I really love Dreadworm Trance, but this is a return to form.
It's interesting because they've decided to keep the 4.1 change of the cheaper Ruin 3 casts. They're still retaining the fact that Ruin 3 is meant to cost the same as Ruin 1 would, but now instead of being very little potency, it's even more than it was in Heavensward, which brings on to the more interesting change which they decided to do with 5.0, and that is the Festa bonus, where for each dot you've got active, the potency increases. Now with the GCDs now, the Ruin line in particular, every extra dot that you have active on a target is going to increase your Ruin GCDs by 50 each for up to 100. So Ruin 2 is now 80, it's had a nerf, thankfully. And with both dots active, as you can see here, 180 for both. And that's still a lot more than what we were used to for a Ruin 2 GCD. But Ruin 3 now is 250, and that's before we even account for Ruination or anything else. And we still retain Ruin 4. Ruin 4 now with all the benefits, 300 before Ruination, and that's the highest GCD we've ever had. And it's very nice to see that. One thing of note though is it wasn't free gains. It did come at a bit of a cost, and if you look at Miasma 3 and Bio 3, we've taken a bit of a step back in our dot potency per tick, and now instead of 100, we're back to 80, which was the start of 4.0. But I think in terms of trades off, as we're kind of deviating a bit away from being like a dot mage, we're becoming more of a Rune mage. I know some people are a bit blasé about that, but I like the fact that GCDs are worth a damn. Oh, I'm sorry, it's really quiet. I'm gonna see what I can do. I'll let other people talk for a bit whilst I try and figure this out.
Well, I think we're no less of a dot mage than we were in Stormblood. They kind of automated all the dots in Stormblood, which is, I mean, it is what it is. At the very least, we got Demis to replace dot management.
Well, personally, I kind of like the fact that potency is getting shifted more towards the GCD as opposed to dots, just because. I mean, I know that casting Ruin 3 itself is not necessarily the most engaging mechanic, but it's at least doing something, as opposed to when you're recasting dots. Most of your recast comes from Try Disaster, where the only thing you're doing is just using an off GCD to weave. And like the only engaging mechanic in that regard is basically maintaining your dot alignment around raid buffs, and obviously avoiding clipping to avoid having like your dots just fall off entirely while you wait for your Try Disaster.
I agree.
It's like I do like the fact that potency is getting shifted more towards the GCD, because it's, again, it may not be the most engaging part of the class, but I still feel like it's more engaging as opposed to like just hitting an off GCD every 30 seconds.
And Try Disaster is still plenty strong. 800 potency is pretty good for a move.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for not having to use the hardcast dots, like hardcast dots are pretty woeful now. But Try Disaster, again, you know, freeing up that GCD space is always really valuable. So let me see if I can tweak the sound.
I'm actually surprised that the MP cost is so low on Ruin 3. Like, I genuinely believed when we found out about Ruin 3 or rather having the potency buff to it, I really thought that they were going to try to shift more of an MP requirement to using it, and then to see it only cost actually less than a Ruin 2, I'm actually like really surprised.
Well, it's just our base GCD now. Like, I think they wanted to do away with the mana mini game, and also we have Lucid on 60 seconds now, so none of the mages will be wanting for mana during fights. You're gonna basically have unlimited mana.
How is this now? Is it louder? Maybe too loud? I hope it's not too loud.
I can just adjust you on Discord. It won't bother me.
I'm just hoping it's
Sounds good to
okay
me.
for the stream. Nothing changed. Feels bad.
Ah,
I bought a new mic and I'll figure it out later. Try that anyway.
Is it an OBS setting? Or maybe even like a Windows setting?
I don't know. I have like 5 million different settings. There's one in Discord, one in OBS. There's one for the actual mic itself, and I've got them all like turned up. I'll try OBS again.
It should be in either OBS or the actual mic settings. Discord shouldn't affect your mic.
Oh, I see what the problem is. Alright, this should be better. Okay, everyone's like my ears. Okay, audio troubles. Alright, let me fix that more.
We're just making sure people know it's a Final Fantasy stream.
Is this alright? Sorry about that. I had the wrong mic set in OBS. It was picking up my headset mic as opposed to my mic. But anyway, this should be better now. Sorry about that. Alright, let's continue. So, in the GCD slide here, we've also got listed an old friend of ours that has gone through quite a few changes over the years. Tribind. Tribind doesn't exist anymore. Well, maybe it does, but it's called something else. We have a GCD called Outburst, and Outburst actually has the potency of what Tribind became in Dreadworm Trance. Oh, increase a little bit more? Okay, let me try this. Hopefully this is okay. Alright, thanks. So Outburst is interesting because we've never actually had a AoE GCD as strong as that for an all-purpose situation. Like, it was only limited to Dreadworm Trance. In 4.1, it became 100 potency action due to an error from Square Enix. It wasn't meant to be as strong as that, or so they say. Even though the tooltip said it should be, they're like, nah, tooltip was wrong, therefore the GCD is wrong. So that got nerfed to 70, and that's what we came used to, but we didn't end up using it that much because for AoE, we'd usually just rush Bahamut, Painfire, etc. But now we have Outburst for AoE as a standard GCD. Previously, our strongest GCD used to be Blizzard 2, but that was around us rather than target AoE. Whereas this one is target AoE around whatever you're casting against, and has a very interesting extra benefit where it gains 20 potency from Ruination. And if you haven't read the changes for 5.0, we'll move on to why that's actually pretty interesting, because you'd think, well, isn't Ruination just a single target status? Like, how is it going to be good for an AoE spell? There's reasons. And then the other GCDs that we have here at the bottom, unfortunately, Physic is still a thing. We don't yet know, at least I haven't found any footage of people bothering to cast Physic, because why would they? Don't know if it's scaling of intelligence or still scaling of mind. I hope to God that critical health LBGs doesn't exist, but at least our GCDs are so good that Physic is never the right choice now in 5.0 if it still exists.
I'm honestly... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. Feel free.
I was going to say, I'm honestly very surprised that Physic made it into the next expansion. I thought they were going to prune it for sure. And they pruned things like Rouse and Shadow Flare, but they left Physic in the game.
Yeah, that's why it makes me wonder if they actually have decided to make it scale with intelligence, which would be very interesting, especially with another defensive change that we've had announced. But if it's still the piddly amount that we're very familiar with, it's like, why bother? Just get rid of it. No need. But I guess it is Arcanist heritage. And then next GCD is one that's definitely been a source of controversy in the fact that people would argue, oh, it's too strong and for prog reasons. Raise spells. Now, Raise, a lot of people were thinking maybe Square Enix would have like a hard cooldown on it. You'd only be able to do like once a minute, once every few minutes. A lot of like thoughts about what they would do to limit this very powerful GCD for progression and also for salvaging runs, which otherwise would fail if the raise wasn't available. It's still the same 8-second base cast time, and one of the interesting changes I noticed was previously for raise, summoner could only cast like 3 raises before bottoming out. We didn't have the max MP pool to do more. Literally limited in that regard. Whereas now, because everyone has 10k MP max, we can actually cast 4 raises and still have enough mana to chain runes, which may not seem much, but it's a nice change in that regard, especially with lucid changes and all that. But I'm genuinely surprised that Raise is still like a free GCD. They might still change it and limit it in other ways. I don't know, but I know it's something that we've discussed in the past of like the merits of, do you bring like a summoner for prog, do you bring a red mage for prog for like Raise reasons, like black mage reasons for not picking them because they don't have it, etc. I wonder what your thoughts are for seeing the fact that Raise is pretty much still a thing.
I'm still pretty mind blown, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, what I was gonna say is, you know, especially for the perspective of progression rating, like obviously when you're optimizing, raising doesn't necessarily matter so much, but in progression, like the issue is that for a caster to raid, and what this allows a group to do is that healers essentially can go unpunished for group deaths because the healer no longer has to worry about picking up a dead party member that's on the ground, and that basically means that healers can maintain their MP economy while the caster is the one that basically takes care of that for the healer. And when I think about progression, healer MP I think is one of the most important resources to a party, because if a healer doesn't have MP, you're going to die, because that means that they can't heal, they can't mitigate anything like that. So the fact that they've continued to leave Raise almost untouched, and especially when you consider like the current fight design, or I guess the fight design with Stormblood, obviously we don't know what's coming with the next expansion. Maybe they'll, you know, increase difficulty of some kind with the next tier of Savage raids. But with Stormblood, I feel like part of the reason why progression takes groups so little time is because casters are just able to make up for the mistakes that people are making, or just obviously you're going to die in prog, right? So the caster can take care of that, and the healers just kind of can do what they need to do.
I'd say I was also very surprised that it was unchanged as well. In fact, I think Summoner got better at raising, and so did Red Mage to an extent, because Lucid is on such a short cooldown now, and if, I'm sure in a future slide we'll go over it, but with the cast time reduction in Trance, it means that you can shorten raise to 5 seconds. So it's pretty good. That's like light speed.
Yeah, that's
for Summoner.
That's a very interesting thing as well, is just standing still for nearly 8 seconds. That can be really tricky with mechanics, especially when you don't know what the hell is going to happen in the next few seconds, especially when it's blind prog. Whereas 5 seconds, a lot more tolerable, just standing still, getting a raise off before you have to dodge. I think that's going to be a nice have for sure, especially considering we won't have Swift always. We don't have the instant on demand with dual cast. So I think it's definitely a very big quality of life thing for race recovery, especially considering, you know, the Dreadwing Trance and Firebird Trance, which we'll come to later. But yeah, it's very interesting with like the economy of mana as well. I'm not sure how mana hungry healers are. I haven't really looked into that, but we don't have mana shift anymore, and so we have all this excess mana that we can't really do much with. Can't give it to the healer, but the fact that it's like easier for us to raise to help the healers focus more on what matters, I do think that's nice in that regard, but maybe also highlights just how strong it is to have on a non-healer job. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, so it's pretty much covered Summoner GCDs, at least the core ones. There are some others of note to talk about a bit later, but these are the ones that we'll be using on a much more regular basis. Next one, very important topic, and this one covers rotational changes in particular. So in 4.0, our entire rotation was dictated and paced by how we used Aetherflow. Aetherflow was the most important action for Summoner, where drifting that would be bad news bears in the long term because everything would start to unravel in alignment. Paste your Bahamut's, paste your Trances, paste your alignment against raid buffs. Like, everything was so important contingent on trying to keep a very tight and good Aetherflow cycle. Well, in 5.0, they decided, you know what? Aetherflow doesn't exist for summoners. We'll just give it to scholars instead. And we're like, what? So those leaks before on 4chan, which showed Aetherflow being grayed out, there was truth behind that. So Summoner doesn't actually have the Aetherflow action anymore in 5.0. But we still retain the Aetherflow mechanic. That hasn't gone. That is still very much an Arcanist and Summoner and Scholar thing. Only big change that might take a bit of getting used to. I don't think it'll be that much of a change mechanically. Aetherflow stacks now cap only at 2 instead of 3. This limits our potential stack use options, but how we still kind of have 3 Aetherflow actions to use. So they introduced Aetherflow stack gain with Energy Drain and Energy Siphon. So on the slide here, you can see they're the top 2 actions. Energy Drain no longer drains HP and MP, and instead only provides Aetherflow 2, so that's 2 stacks. Interesting point, its recast is 30 seconds. So this means that we're expecting to use it twice a minute, which means we're expecting to have 4 Aetherflow stacks a minute, which when you add everything up, that's 4 Aetherflow stacks and 2 energy drains. And that's, if you consider Festa, which is just underneath. Festa also had a nice bit of a buff there, now being 400 potency a cast. 2 Festas and energy drain is 900 potency every 30 seconds. That is more Aetherflow single target damage than we've ever had, because it's 1800 a minute. The new action that they've introduced is Energy Siphon, and this is an AoE equivalent, where you'd want to use it against 3 targets or more to be a DPS gain. And that also increases your Aetherflow stacks by 2. And shares a cooldown with Energy Drain. So you can only use either or. You cannot use one after the other, and they do not share the charge mechanic. Other Aether action changes. Pain Flare took a bit of a hit. It's now at 140. So in 4.0 it used to be 200. Then it got nerfed to 180. Now it's 140. And, you know, hurts a bit. But we gain AoE in many other regards that I don't think we're going to notice it all that much. The other interesting Aetherflow action change is that Bane no longer consumes Aether stacks to use. Bane is its own separate cooldown. And they probably realized we were never using Bane, or very rarely using Bane in 4.0. And they're like, you know what, okay, fine. We'll make it useful in another way, and we'll make it so that you can use it fairly often and without consuming your main Aetherflow resources that you'd rather use on Festa and Pain Flare. Yes, a lot of changes with Aetherflow. What do you guys think about these changes?
Well, I'm sorry, you could talk, Shinryu. You haven't really spoken.
I think a big thing about it is just that you no longer gain any MP from Aetherflow because you don't have it. You don't gain any MP from Energy Drain, so you're completely reliant on Lucid.
It's a very good point, actually, where post-death recovery, if Lucid is off cooldown, then we only have our 20% of our MP to deal with. Luckily, we're not having to spend a lot of MP in summoning Egis anymore. That'll be mentioned a bit later when we talk about pets. But we still have, if we go up here, still have to spend, excuse me, 1100 MP on refreshing dots if Tri isn't available, and then GCDs. I think... Well, actually, I haven't looked into Mana Sustain, but Ruin 3 is still fairly either neutral or is positive. I think it's maybe a little negative. I need to look into that. But it's a very good point. It's... Say we die and we're raised. If we don't have Lucid, we can't Aetherflow to then raise someone else. Like, sometimes you'll get the summoner who could then raise someone else because they'll have Swiftcast ready and no one else can justify standing still for ages. That's a use case I've seen a lot over the years, in Prague especially. Something I actually didn't think about until then. So, yeah, that's a good one to mention.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I like the fact that we're gonna have more festers to use. Obviously, when they tell you, hey, we're gonna basically double your potency gains through fester actions, I mean, you're gonna be happy with that. You gain damage. Pain Flare getting a nerf, I just assume that's because they are giving us additional actions elsewhere to buffer our AoE and allow us to actually have better AoE than we've ever had. And then there's Bane, and I don't really know how to feel about Bane right now, because while in some ways Bane will indirectly be buffed by the simple fact that hard casting will be much more punishing against your GCD, it's still, Bane still has that very hard diminishing return for every additional enemy, and the only other additional effect that actually seems a little bit useful is the fact that it can spread ruining, which will help when you're actually casting spells like Burst. But I don't know. I still miss that Heavensward. That Heavensward Bane.
Oh, Heavensward Bane. That was a very, very strong iteration of Bane. And also back when we had more dot potency per tick as well. Like, if you're thinking about how it's retaining the 4.0 decay, 80% less damage on all other after the 5th. It's ticking for so little, and you're like, why? And back when hardcast GCDs for Ruin, etc., were worth less, there was more emphasis on hardcasting and then, like using Pain Flares over ever using Bane. Whereas now Bane being freer to use is interesting. It's like you're not compromising a Pain Flare to use it, which I do like, but I still hate the fact that the drop off is so stark. And I know that scholars have sometimes looked at the additional effect that Bane has, but I don't ever really remember it being a relevant play in 4.x where you're looking at the timer and be like, oh, that target refreshed. I'm gonna just ignore that one. I don't even know. Like, I've never even bothered to check if Biomiasma had refreshed on something. Usually stuff dies before that even matters. There haven't been ad waves that have lasted a long time in a very long while, so I don't know. Bane...
That was the other thing I was going to bring up, actually. Like, when you look at raid encounters, typically ads don't really stay alive very long. It's like you have fights like O5S where you'll have, 6 or 7 ninja ads, so like it looks good to Bane, but then they die in 5 seconds, and then you're like, okay, why did I use Bane in the first place?
Yeah.
Now it's free.
Well, now it's free.
Just solo ads, tell everyone to go away and just, get your 100 percentile soloing ads.
The pad.
Oh my god, the pad.
I think something to note, I think is interesting is, at least on Summoner, so this is based solely on my anecdotal experience, but whenever I had friends try to pick up Summoner, something that they always complained about was there's too many buttons. The class has a high learning curve, at least at the very start, just because you have to memorize where everything is. But they seem to have taken the route of consolidating moves into one button, like we'll go over it in future slides. Energy Drain is one of them in a sense, but like the Egis assaults, the Demis, Trances. Another thing is, well, at least for Pain Flare, the way I think of it is, in a sense, it's stronger in that we get 4 of them. Now that we don't have to contest with Bane, you're gaining 140 times 4 Pain Flare potency per minute versus 180 times 2 or times 3 if you're not using Bane.
That's a very good point there. With the increase in actions. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And in raids, I know there are not that many raid situations where there's lots of ads, but it's pretty common that there's going to be one ad that comes along and you have to kill. But Bane's actually really good for that because since, one, they typically don't live that long even still, and two, because our GCD is so strong now, the opportunity cost to hard cast your dot on the other ad is going to be really high. So even if the dot damage on the ad takes a hit because of Bane, it's probably going to be better just to Bane anyway, because you don't have the opportunity cost of using your now valuable GCDs.
Yeah, the opportunity cost situation was one of, like, for us over the years, it's flip-flopped a bit, where in Heaven's Ward, I mean, Bane was a lot better too, but our GCD was also very good, and hard casting 3 dots on multiple targets was very mana taxing, dipped into our Ruin 3 mana reserves, and just took more time. So Bane had a good amount of value there. Then along comes 4.0, and Bane's value is thrown through the gutter. It's absolutely awful, and we're just thinking, why? What are you thinking, Square? What are you thinking, Yoshida? Whereas now, because as you mentioned, our GCDs are again so much better, and this is one of my favorite things to think about, is that because GCDs are good, Bane has more of a purpose again, instead of gathering cobwebs and dust in the corner. And then there's the other benefit, which if you look at Tri-Disaster and the Bane tooltips, it talks about Ruination. So at level 78, we get a trait which allows Bane to spread Ruination. And this is really, really interesting because it means that Outburst now becomes a 90 potency GCD per target with no fall off. And that's almost double the highest amount we've ever had for a GCD for AoE, which I like that fact very much. So definitely our AoE sustain has gained with this change. Excuse me. But yeah, that covers Aetherflow. And we've talked about how it's no longer an action, but we haven't talked about Aetherflow's other interaction with us in 4.0, which is how it mattered so much for our Dreadworm Aether. And that moves us on to the next slide for Trances and Demi-Summons. And Trances have been very integral since Heaven's Ward, where we first learned Dreadworm Trance. And it's gone through several iterations. Not only do we have Dreadworm Trance, but we also learned how to have a Phoenix Trance. We have Firebird Trance. And the trances themselves have undergone some interesting changes, some of which you mentioned a bit earlier. See the first 2 actions on this slide here. Reduces spell casting times by 2.5 seconds. And it's the same for both of them. Previously, they made it so that Dreadworm Trance only reduced the cast time of Ruin 3 by 2.5 seconds, basically making it instant, which is how we gained a lot of mobility in the 4.1 changes. Excuse me. Fiber Trance also does the same. Now, it's interesting that it's spell casting time because it applies to all of our GCDs, or at least that is the impression that we're given. So it's making the outbursts instant, whereas before, if we were to try bind in Dreadworm Trance, we couldn't just move around and cast unless we were swifting, but we'd have to slide cast if we needed to, otherwise we just turret. Whereas now, you just move around and cast them too. But the other thing that was mentioned earlier is how this impacts hard casting raises, and that is very interesting prog utility in that sense. I mean, ideally, you wouldn't want to be raising so much because that means a run is not going as well as it should be, but I'd rather spend less time having to cast raise to get someone back up than have longer and risk not getting them up at all. So that's the first important change with the trances. Trances still reset Tri-Disaster, that's a 4.0 change. Another one is granted, the trait is not in this slide. I guess I forgot to put it in. But, oh yes. Dreadworm Trance no longer provides a 10% magic buff. And I know quite a few people were a bit disappointed at hearing about this because it was a nice alignment bonus to keep Dreadworm Trance along with, say, your trick windows and all of the raid buffs. Now it's literally just a try reset and cast time reduction. So it does mean that we don't have to think as much for a try always aligning with trick, but we have other alignment concerns for a 5.0. Death Flare has taken a hit on two fronts because of this. Death Flare was always treated as a 440 potency action for the first target because of the 10% buff. Now it's just a 400 potency action because that buff doesn't exist, but instead of having a 10% decay per target, Death Flare has had a 5.0 change, which some AoEs have had, where the first target is full damage and all other targets are 50%. That's quite enough, especially in two-target cleave, which happened quite a bit in Stormblood. But again, we're gaining AoE in other regards that it's not as much of a problem to think about. But yes, the next change about Dreadworm Trance is that at level 72 you get a trait which says whenever you complete a trance, instead of gaining 1 Dreadworm Ether, you gain 2. Now this is very interesting because it means that we don't have to trance twice to summon Bahamut. We just need to Dreadworm Trance once, and then we get Bahamut after. And this was one of the things that led us to thinking, hey, maybe the summoner rotation is 1 minute now. That'd be really cool if we could just trance Bahamut Phoenix. But alas, we discovered today, especially with video footage, shout out to Larry Zor for actually recording these things, Dreadworm Trance... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Dreadworm Trance and Fiverr Trance share a cooldown, meaning that we cannot do Trance into Bahamut into Phoenix into Trance into Bahamut into Phoenix. Instead, we have this weird flip-flop between Trance, Bahamut, some downtime or whatever, Phoenix Trance with Phoenix, downtime, wait and pray for the next Dreadworm Trance to come off cooldown. We have a lot of filler because of this. So yes, that's something we've been talking a lot about today since we saw the video footage. I will try and find a clip and I'll post it in chat for people who haven't seen what I'm talking about. But if you're in the Balanced Summon channels, you will have known that this discussion has been going on all day. All day.
I personally, when the live letter and all those leaks before the embargo lift came out, I was really excited because I was like, oh, we're not gonna have, because a big flaw with Stormblood Summoner is you have so much downtime in between your burst phases. So I was like, oh, they're gonna get rid of all the downtime, so now we're only going to have Dreadworm Trance, Bahamut, and Phoenix, so it's perfect. You get 4 summons instead of 1 summon every 2 minutes. But then that ended up not being true. So the unfortunate thing is we kind of keep that design flaw where, I mean, after you use your Phoenix, you got 40 seconds where before your next Dreadworm Trance comes up, you're going to be doing, well, not much. You're going to be casting a lot of Ruin 3s. That's kind of suck. I mean, you have an energy drain and some Festers and some Eggy assaults, but that's it really for that entire period.
Yeah, I logged in the Discord today.
Yeah.
I see the Balanced Discord, and I'm like right in the Summoner channel, and so like, you know, I'm hyped up because I'm like, all right, we're finally gonna have confirmation on it's gonna be a good day. Literally, the first thing I read is someone going, oh, so what do we do with Dreadworm Trance sharing the same cooldown as Phoenix? And I'm just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you,
like,
you
what
were late
just happened?
to joining and finding that out. I was like, where are you to talk about this? And
and I see this and I'm just like, oh my god, like they did not just do that.
You know, we got bait and switched by the trailer because nobody noticed. We didn't know at the time because they started in Bahamut, presumably so they could speed up the class show off so it would fit into the video properly during the live letter.
And we couldn't even see cooldowns. It was literally just the gauge. So it's like, this looks really nice. And I just remember looking at Larry Zor's video around the timestamp that I posted in chat, and I'm looking, I'm like, wait a minute, it's not resetting. Why isn't it resetting? Why don't you reset? And I'm just like getting like more and more flustered about this. I immediately contact Fright and I'm like, Fright, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, oh, it's a shame. The dream of the seamless 1 minute rotation was not to be. At least not for 5.0. Who knows about the future? Pray to Bahamut.
They almost had it, and then they kind of just threw it away. But I mean, that's okay. Essentially, what this means is, so I mean, we have 2 burst phases. It's Bahamut and our Dreadworm Transburst phase, where we use a bunch of cooldowns and Fester. Now that Dreadworm Transburst phase is just going to be replaced with Phoenix. So the rotation, honestly, it won't change dramatically in its core structure because of that. We're still going to have the 2 minute cycle. And I know everybody loves Ruin Spam.
Ruin Mage. I know quite a few people in chat right now. They absolutely love casting Ruins over and over. It's their favorite part of the summoner rotation, especially for people like Zuzu. I know he loves it. But the thing is, I remember I was discussing it with someone on Twitter, and I'm like, oh my god, summoner, you know, all that hype. And then we realized this and we're like, wait, it's not what we thought. It's, oh no. And it's how there's more filler in the rotation in the Shonen Jump anime. And I'm thinking, geez, so many Ruin casts. But in terms of the context of how we do our rotation nowadays, probably gonna be shuffling some things around. There's some other memes relating to Dreadworm Trance. So one of the clauses I put on the 3rd bullet point is the fact that you can use Dreadworm Trance out of combat.
You know,
and then that led to the thought process, and I was thinking this before the embargo was listed. I'm like, wait a minute, if you can use this outside of combat, doesn't that mean you can use it pre-pull? Doesn't that mean you can then Bahamut pre-pull? Doesn't that mean you can then make some horrible hybrid of like Demi-Bahamut Phoenix opener? And I'm like, oh my god, I don't want us to be Heaven's Ward Warrior.
You know, that's a good point because it's true. You know, I think Yoshi P, I believe in the live letter, was like, summoners won't have to wait for the party won't have to wait for the summoner to pull anymore. And well, now you have to wait even longer. If it's 60 seconds, then you have to wait that entire 60 seconds.
That would be the biggest meme if that actually
not
works
quite
out to be true.
Yeah, because your Bahamut's 20 seconds, so you'd only have to wait 40. But you're still waiting longer, and it's...
I mean, the fact that it's an option means it's something that we have to look into, because if it has merits, especially like if an encounter would benefit from like the extra cleave early, or like we don't know how the fights are going to be, we don't know what's going to happen in raids or in dungeon or whatever, but the fact that it's an option to me is very scary, because I remember having to wait for warriors all the time in Heaven's Ward. I remember like all these memes, not only that, but
the 80-second countdown meme.
The 80-second countdown, where not only were you waiting on that, but you also, like, if you were speedrunning, you were hoping that your Astra would pull the balances, and if they didn't pull the balances, you'd have to reset and start that nonsense all over again. Now, cards are not in the scope of this stream, and cards have changed.
No.
But the fact that if it's potency correct to do that, if you're doing speedruns and optimizing,
you're gonna have to wait for it.
You're gonna have to wait for it if you're running with a summoner. Please run with a summoner. Don't leave summoner because of this. We're good, I promise. But...
You know, something else I thought of that Jolteon mentioned in chat was because one of the Titan Eggy Assaults is it gives you a shield, and now you can store your Ruin 4 procs, which we haven't gone over yet. But I was gonna say, what if you also just wait for 4 of those procs? You can start off with 4 Ruin 4s. That's actually really fucked up.
Especially where each subsequent proc also refreshes the duration. Like that I mean, that was expected. But the fact is, like, if you all played in Heavensward, so you remember how Aether Trail used to work, where if you needed to, you could extend Aether Trail by refreshing its duration by using another Aether action. And it's kind of like that, where as long as you're not overflowing and losing procs, you can extend the duration and keep, 4 stacks for however long.
Actually, you could do a 3-minute countdown. So you get your 4 Ruin 4s, and then you wait for the Eggy Assault to come off cooldown for both charges. So you're actually waiting 3 minutes.
Okay. We're going deep. All right, let's make a note of this. 3-minute prepull summoner double demi 4 Ruin 4 opener. There we go. That will be the meme opener, which is probably going to be potency correct, and we're going to hate ourselves.
Oh no! I don't want this timeline.
I can't wait to make that image, because people already ask us now, hey, do I have to do this Titan pre-pull? Like, that's now, like, imagine in 5.0, and then I have to tell people, yeah, so you're gonna sit there for 3 minutes and just keep casting your Eggy Assault and bait for more procs.
I didn't even think about the stacking. Like, I said earlier, like, in one of our chats, about how I like the fact that if we can use these actions, out of combat and stuff, we can use Flaming Crush, and we can get, like, Ruin 4 that way. That's cool. I like that. But then, if there's some...
You're gonna get Ruin 4s.
Oh my god. It's... Yes. If it's a thing, we'll make it a thing, and then you can hate us later. But, yes, you've heard it here first.
Everybody can hate Summoner. It's gonna be the new meme. If it's true. I hope that they just don't let you do that.
We have to...
It wouldn't be that hard to do.
Spread it to the Japanese as well. Be like to Miyabi and Marcos, like, hey... You talk to us, right? You like some of the things we do? Here's this lovely opener, and we want all of Japan to use it. And then I'll post about it on Lodestone, and...
3-minute countdown.
Oh my god.
Prep your Bahamut opener with it. God.
Oh, that's very true. If you spread it to the Japanese, maybe Square might actually notice. They would. Sorry, I digress. So that's trans nonsense and openers. Now, because, like, Dreadham Aether and the flow is not dictated by Aetherflow anymore, it's trance, which leads to the next step. After you use Dreadham Trance, you get Demi Bahamut. Now, that's favorite Dragon Overlord who has anxiety issues, bit clingy. He's had a few changes as well. Couple ones, at least, that we've noticed. One which we kind of inferred from the job action trailer, but we weren't 100% until we saw video footage, where we wanted to see interactions for Wormwave. So 4.0 Wormwave is all based on timing and sequencing your targetable actions that affect an enemy. So Ruin GCDs, Dot Hardcast, Tri Disaster, Festa, Pain Flare, Bane, and Ador. Like, all of these things... Even poison pots, but we don't talk about that. All of those things could proc Wormwave, and you would stagger things so that you would aim for the target of 11 Wormwaves, 2 Akborns, or if you had God Ping scenario 12, but anyway. Now, we're actually limited in Wormwave potential, and we've lost a bunch of potency from summons because of this, because Wormwave only procs off of GCDs. Which... I agree with the sentiment. It does dumb down the Bahamut rotations, but also I also feel that maybe Bahamut rotations were a bit too much for part of the player base. I don't know if that's the case or not.
I felt that while it was maybe not very transparent on how the queuing system worked and where you had to place your off GCDs. Because sometimes it was like you had to place at the beginning or at the very end of your GCD window. But I feel that I personally in my opinion, don't like this change very much because I feel that it strips some of the core gameplay out of Bahamut. And the only good thing to come out of this is now you can use you don't have to feel bad for your own damage about using Adol for mitigation. But I think that's the only good change that came out of this.
Yeah, like not having that was one of the conflicts of interest, I suppose, where summoners would be like, but I want to use Adol for Bahamut, and then we were like, well, you can use these sets that make it more flexible or whatnot, but my healers want me to use Adol for this, and I want to use that. And now, like, Adol for Bahamut, dead concept. Trances for Bahamut, dead concept. Festus for Bahamut, that's the one I'm maybe a bit sad about, is the Festus and energy drains, dead concept as well for Wormwave generation. And it does simplify it for the general player, which for what Square is after, that's a good thing, but it makes the Demi rotations not as interactive, at least in my opinion. I also feel that the other aspect of Bahamut that has been changed, and I think this is more quality of life thing, especially maybe as an anti-ghost measure. Not that I would say that Square Enix is looking at ghosting, but say players might use their first Enkindle Bahamut too late, which means that they wouldn't have time to use their second. Bahamut would be gone, or he would be despawning as it would go out. Ghosting in Act 1 is something I've always been against, which is why I know Tama's in the chat. Tama, you're one that kept an eye on in 4.0 in Delta. Back when we were looking at the merits of 12 Wormwaves, if you were getting 12 Wormwaves but ghosting your second Act 1, yes, you were winning on FF logs, but in reality for speedruns, you were making your party lose. And that's why I always advocated never compromise your Act 1s. So Enkindle Bahamut now has a 10-second cooldown instead of 13, so that's 3 seconds of leeway. I don't feel that changes too much for how we're used to Bahamut. I don't know.
I feel like
if
you'd still slot it in at the very end, so you can, because of that, I assume the dead period is still going to be there, so you want to put it at the very end still, I feel like, so you can push that dead period effectively out of the Bahamut, so you get maximum Wormwaves.
It's not so much that, it's the fact that if you do the second Morn too early, you're going to force yourself into a situation where you'll have to ruin 2 at least one additional time just to ensure that you get the Wormwave after. And so if you do it at the end, you can ensure like you'll push as many Ruin 3s beforehand and only use the one Ruin 2 to weave. Or rather to weave the second Morn. That's why you would do it there.
Another interesting thing that I just considered when I was reading chat, and even though what was said in chat was completely unrelated, for some reason it made me think of it. So one concept that we familiarized ourselves with in 4.0 was that of rushing, where we would rush ether actions to rush Bahamut to get more potency in before a fight would end or before a jump, etc. This change is actually kind of nice for that, because it means that, let's say those 3 seconds would matter between whether the second Akmon would land or not. Now it lands. And, I don't know, that to me is a nice happenstance, where if we did have to rush a Demi-Summon for the end, not that we really can rush because it's a fairly rigid rotation now, but let's say we finish a Death Flare early to summon Bahamut early, like that I can still see is happening depending on when a fight ends, because Dreadhorn Trance we can still end early with Death Flare. That into Bahamut, into getting 2 Akmons, those 3 seconds could matter. And I think that it's a nice quality of life change, maybe with some applications. Maybe not as many as I'm thinking, but we'll have to see in encounters.
Rush Bahamut, fight still lasts another 10 seconds, then you realize you can't use your Phoenix. Pepe hit.
It feels bad.
Something I find a little strange, actually, talking about Phoenix, is so Ruin 3 is worth 270 potency with Ruination. However, if you look at Fountain of Fire and Brand, you realize that the average between those, because I think it's really cool that it's like a mini combo between Fountain and Brand, but the average of the two is 275 potency, so it's only marginally better than Ruin 3 with Ruination. So, but I guess the brand has AoE, and that's gonna be pretty nice.
Actually,
We
in
kind of
certain
assumed
situations.
that like the flame buff that you gain from Fountain of Fire would allow you to like cast Brand multiple times, but if I remember correctly from watching Larry Zor's video, it actually just like consumes it. So it's like it gives you a proc to use Brand, and then you have to use Fountain.
Yeah, you have to alternate it.
The fact that Brand doesn't actually mention that in the tooltip to me is a bit annoying. I chastise whoever was doing localization for these tooltips because your tooltips suck. Lots of tooltips are really bad, and they were bad in, you know, Stormblood, Mediator. They're also bad now. There's been a whole meme with comparing Japanese tooltips to the English tooltips and noticing that, like, hey, there's lines missing, there's numbers that are flat out wrong, yada yada. I haven't seen the Japanese one for Brand of Purgatory, but if that mentions that, hey, yes, it consumes Burgeoning Flame, and the English one doesn't, I'll have words with D-Square. But that's something that, you know, we were talking about. It's either going to consume or it's going to persist, and footage showed the consume case, which is a shame because if it persisted, that would be more potency, but can't have it all. One thing that I actually had a thought of, and I don't know if this is actually possible, but summons being instacast oGCDs. Now, I remember one property of summons with Demi-Summons, and that is you can end a Demi-Summon early by summoning an Egis, and I'm wondering if that's still a thing, because you might be able to like prematurely end Bahamut to rush out a Phoenix. I don't know if that interaction will happen, but
well, that's a good point.
If that can happen, and like prematurely ending Bahamut's presence, as bad as that feels, can expedite a Phoenix, then maybe that's a bit of flexibility we can gain in rushing in that way. That's something that literally just came to mind right now. If that is,
I think that would only work if you delayed Bahamut though, to, like be close to when Firebird Trance comes off.
That's true. Just thinking though, if that can be done, damn, we're still like, you know, the problem of the trance cooldown, hard lock 60 seconds. Oh, right, that reminds me. There's a meme someone posted on Reddit, and it's very much applicable to this scenario. Don't know if that's legible, but this meme has a lot of depth, and I'm very much a big fan. And nothing changed. Still bound by the shackles of our 60-second cooldown.
There's actually like a second benefit that you might be able to gain. Try to summon an Eggie and enforce the Demi away is if there could be such a situation where if you're in like the last 1 or 2 seconds of like your Phoenix, for example, you use your last instacast and the Scarlet Flame goes off, like you still have like that 1 second, then what if you force swap the Eggie to try to like game out an extra pet auto? I mean, it's kind of like a minimal game.
Very end.
Yeah.
That's definitely a consideration. If we can't summon Eggies in Demis, I mean, that's a total mechanic change to what used to happen. But like, if they might just make it so that those actions can't be used. But if they can be used, that is, you know, a vector for optimization. Not a particularly big one, but still, it's nice to know your angles. Yes, we talked a bit about Firebird Trance. Now, Firebird Trance is interesting in that whilst you're in Firebird Trance, your Ruin 3 becomes Fountain of Fire, which grants the Burgeoning Flame proc that lets you use Brand. And it alternates Fountain, Brand, and then all of these spells, even though Brand shows a 2.44 cast time, Brand would be instant cast in Firebird Trance because of the spell cast reduction. So you can weave no problem in those windows, especially when you're level 80, and you're wanting to enkindle your Phoenix. Like, you don't have to worry about the fact that, oh, I can only enkindle when I've used a fountain. No, you can, like, enkindle in a Brand or whenever is necessary. There is a weird problem where But I don't know if it's a problem, but it's something that I dislike because it doesn't line up, and also in terms of like the in-game assets, it looks really silly. Fiber Trance is 15 seconds like Dreadhome Trance, and as someone pointed out in chat earlier, this is actually a 1 second nerf over Dreadhome Trance in 4.0, which is 16 seconds. Dreadhome Trance uses the gauge, Bahamut Face will light up, and you'll have the timer tick down from 15 to 0. When you use Fiber Trance, I don't know if sub 80 it still uses the gauge, but when you're level 80, the timer is for Demi-Phoenix, which is 20 seconds, but your Fiber Trance is a little buff icon for 15. And I dislike the fact that there's 5 seconds of difference. Like, to me, it just... I don't understand. Like, why do we have to have Firebird Trance with Phoenix tied together? That I don't understand why they decided to do that. Maybe it's a simplification of pets and stuff.
That's also strange to me. Like, if they wanted to make it different, they also could have put it outside of the Phoenix, so you can at least cut down some of the filler time. But they're one and the same, at least when they come out.
Yeah, and it's, let's say, it's very strange, and I don't know what their plans are, but seeing it, like, I was looking at Larizor's footage just to, like, confirm this, and I was squinting, and I'm like, where the hell is the Fiber Trance buff icon? And it's right at the top of his screen. It's tiny as ever, and it had, like, 11 underneath, and I'm like, oh god, it really is just a tiny little icon. Like, how can you know how much time you have left in your trance if you don't have, like, your icons fairly visible? Like, I blow mine up to 200%. I needed to, like, on Neo X Death because I had troubles telling the difference between the colors. So I could tell by the shapes better. I know I've kept the 200% since then, and I'll see my statuses really easily, but like for people who don't always have their statuses within easy view, it's like, how much time do I have left in Fiber Trance? Oh, it's over. Never mind.
Well, you do keep the GCDs though all the way through the summon.
Yeah,
because like I had seen that in Larry Zor's video where he had
you
1
still
second
keep...
left, and he still had the Fountain of Fire on the bar.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
So even if you lose the trance, you keep Fountain of Fire and Brand.
Okay, that makes better sense then in my mind. Like if it was literally 5 seconds and all of a sudden you forgot how to spit fire, I'd be kind of perplexed. It's like, oh, you have a primal of rebirth and flame here, but you can't. Your runes are back to being just balls.
That's actually a good point, Friday. I'm wondering if they will have a cast time when your trance ends because you lose the light speed effect.
That is a good point. We'll have to like see that in practice because we're limited by the video footage, and I doubt everyone who played Summoner could test every outcome. We're definitely thinking of more as the day goes on. But yes, when live happens, we'll definitely be all spending time figuring out what works and what doesn't. Yes. So we mentioned the Fiber Trance. At 80, it comes with Demi-Phoenix. Why we're summoning Demi-Phoenix? Probably coil reasons. Even though the Summoner job quests never explain Bahamut, so I doubt the Shadowbringers one will explain Phoenix. When you summon Demi-Phoenix, you get a little regen, or as some people are dubbing, Summoner Medica 2. And it radiates out from the Phoenix to everyone nearby, and the range is 15 yards, so it's not actually that big, at least when you compare it to like 30 yarm actions. It does not tick frequently. It's literally on the actor tick, and it's 20, probably pet scaled potency, probably using pet int.
In Larry Zor's video, it was about 400 health per tick, which is
it's like casting physics.
Yeah, it's not very good. So you have to notice then that presumably they're just wearing the minimum gear for level 80. He has 78,000 HP. So over the course of duration of Phoenix, you're probably getting like 6 ticks, 6 times 400. It's like 2,400 health it's something. It's
when you're considering players have like over 70k HP at that point. It's a drop in the ocean. I mean, it's nice flavor. it's going to probably either give us a ton of overheal or heal us a ton of overheal, preferably the latter. Let's pad our healer passes as well as our DPS passes. But yeah, it said it'll be either like 6 or 7 ticks. It does not tick every second. It's to the actor tick, so it's every 3 seconds. And like, it's not gonna make or break anything. If it makes or breaks something, I would be highly surprised, and then I would then ask,
Like,
what are your healers doing? Like, I wouldn't say
the only fringe case I could see it saving somebody is if your healers just refuse to top people off for a mechanic because they were busy greeting. It's very fringe. And
Yeah, but if it's only 400 HP per tick, I mean,
it's so
20 seconds.
little.
That's 6 actor ticks, maybe 7 depending on the timing. So you regen under 3k HP. It's sort of like, I just feel like that's just not impactful in any way.
It makes you thinking emoji. Like, it's not good. Like, I was talking about this with Fright earlier, and we were saying like, I hope I'll paste the picture if I can find it. Where is it? If not, I can just make a new picture of it. But
I'll be like, hey team, this raid wide's gonna hit us for 60k even mitigated. But don't worry, I'll heal you for 2k.
okay.
Well, that's 2k over 20 seconds. That's not even immediately. So it's the thing is, like, even in a speedrun scenario, I just can't see this even saving your healers and
No.
GCDs or any resources. So
there we go. That's the what we talked about there.
I'm just not sure like why it exists, because the way that it exists right now, or what we assume for it to work, it's not really going to be impactful. But if they ever tried to make it impactful and actually make it like an actual strong heal, then it would just create a situation where healers would expect you to use Phoenix actually for raid-wide healing, and then we're basically going to tell them no because we need rotational.
yeah, like, it looks like they wanted the flavor like Phoenix is restorative too, but they also didn't want it to have an impact. So here we are with the 20 points to heal.
Like, there's no way that it would have been like, as SD is saying in chat, imagine if Phoenix did the equivalent of a healer LB3. Like, oh my god, race is already a problem. Like, imagine if Summoner had on demand, like, every 2 minutes LV3, like, everyone is dead, you're all alive, you lose weakness, yada yada. Like, that would be...
Sorry, Red Mage.
Sorry, Red Mage.
There's a new Prague king in town.
I mean, sometimes they already think we're already king, need to be deposed, but that's by the by. But yes, I get that it's flavor because Phoenix is meant to be about rebirth and like recovery from the ashes you soar again, yada yada. I don't get how like Everlasting Flight means you're regenning. Like, I would have liked it if like Everlasting Flight gave you Levitate or something. No, I'm just memeing there. But it's nice.
Dodge all the ground AoEs.
Yeah, dodge all the ground AoEs. It would just be like Catastrophe. But yeah, if a healer ever asks you to like hold Phoenix for the healing, you might need to find a new healer. Just saying. Like, that's not something that should be asked, and I highly doubt in optimized speedruns it's even going to be... Like, it might be looked at, you might look at how much healing is going to be provided, so you can maybe shift some GCDs, fine, that's one thing, but asking a summoner to, like, hold for however long something which already has such a tight rotational restriction, no, don't do that to the summoner, guys, please. That would feel very bad. But anyway, we've talked a lot about Trances and Demi-Summons, which is, you know, the big allure. It's the thing that was in the job showcase. Level 80 ability, meant to be, you know, a tour de force for 5.0. Well, I will talk about some changes which, in my opinion, are quite significant changes. And when Yoshida said in the live letter that Summoner had, you know, medium amount of reworking done, I disagree. I think Summoner had considerable amount of reworking done. Not as much as Machinist, but definitely probably second. So anyway, we're going to talk about our old friends, the Egis. So Egis are very interesting. They've had a lot of QOL and trait improvements for 5.0. First one that they talked about was how they can no longer be damaged. Whether that's like the 4.0 Bahamut treatment or literally they can never be damaged is to be seen. But if they can never be damaged, this is nice because we don't have to worry too much about tank cleaves killing Ifrit, because Ifrit's going to be our single target pet, and if he's nearby and suddenly tank is a bit off angle and you don't notice and suddenly your pet is dead. I mean, yes, you can summon instantly with a 10-second cooldown at no cost in mana, fine, but you're losing pet uptime, and that always, felt bad, especially back when you did have to hardcast and use some of your mana on it. Man, in 4.0, that was especially bad when it was 6-second base and it cost twice as much as it does now. Like, that was... And similarly, I know Fright was very familiar with the fact that back in 4.0, Bahamut could die to tank busters. Not all of them, but he told me, like, I remember Sad DM saying, my Bahamut died to Thunder 3, and I'm thinking, how is your Bahamut close enough to get hit by Thunder 3 in the first place? But I didn't want to, like, ask questions. But that's how we learn, like, 100% Bahamut could die, and when he dies, he just flies away, and you have no more timer. Pets no longer being damaged is nice. We don't have to worry about that. It does mean that Titan Eggy is no longer a tanking Eggy. Like, if they can't take damage... well, I mean, he could be a tanking Eggy, but then it would be broken as hell, because you just have a one-sided tank that could never die. Like, no, they're not going to do that. So Titan Eggy can't tank anymore, and his actions don't have increased enmity, so he's literally just a weaker melee Eggy now. But he has some interesting utility that we'll talk about in a sec. Related to pet survivability, Sustain has been removed. Everyone that clamored for it back in 4.0, sucks to be you. Now we don't have Sustain. We don't need Sustain. And I highly doubt that people, after they got it back, used it often. If you're soloing old content, like I know Shinryu, you did a fair bit of a soloing coil towards the end of this expansion. I remember we would talk about that. Sustain had value there, but you weren't using Sustain in raids. You weren't wasting a GCD on that. If you had to, something was very, very wrong. I remember only ever wanting to use it in one dungeon while leveling up. That was Doma Castle, and it was the very first pull where there's these AoEs, and if they hit your Eggy runs away and then pulls the entire pack, and then you wipe. Like, Sustain being gone, I do not shed any tears for. It is a bit sad to me, but also not so sad that Rouse has also been removed. Rouse was an interesting point of optimization in 4.0. I'm sad that we've lost both Rouse and Spur. All of us here can definitely remember Rouse and Spur together for Enkindles. That combined multiplier, because both were 40%. It made Aerial Blast feel like an extra death flare. Like, that's how strong both of them together were. Spur being gone, okay, fine. Then Rouse. But it does mean, like, Pet Sustain has taken a hit, because the 20 seconds of Pet Auto is now, there's no buff. It's literally just the same rate, unless there's other rate buffs. Other mark changes that they mentioned were that pet commands have been either removed or reduced. For example, Egis, there is no obey command anymore, and you'll be thinking, oh my god, how am I going to change targets? Apparently Sick is still around. Sick, I'm betting, doesn't use Eggy Assault actions. I'm thinking that will be like our new obey, and that obey is now the default. So that's how we'll be able to change targets.
I thought I saw somewhere that Sick was gone. There's only Obey now. Obey and Eggy Assault. Sick is no longer a thing. Like, pet stances are no longer a thing. There's no guard. There's no Sick. There's just Obey.
I have some pictures which suggest otherwise. I might have misremembered Sick versus Obey, but there was definitely like heal in place and such. Although the tooltips for them were a load of nonsense. It was like, instead of showing the icon with the description, it was like the cure icon for like a general action, and it said like attacks something. Like, I think that's what it was. But there were a bunch of pet actions available. I can't find a picture of it right now. Sorry, excuse me. But if sick is definitely still in, then that will probably be how we'll toggle between targets. If not, then it'll be like, what are we gonna do? But definitely I do remember place and heal, and I think guard was there too. But yeah, and the actual pet commands, like aerial slash, Crimson Cyclone, etc. They're now all accessible with Eggy Assault, which is shared action. So depending on which Eggy you have out, the icon will change. And if you don't have an Eggy out, it will look like the default Eggy Assault action, which is a carbuncle over a book. And Eggy Assault 1 is either aerial slash for Garuda, Crimson Cyclone for Ifrit, or Earthen Armor for Titan. Now, Earthen Armor is very, very exciting change for Summoner, especially if you've been old school Summoner, where for our entire lifetime as Summoners, we've not had like a shield like this. Earthen Armor, and its third one in the slide here, Earthen Armor creates a barrier around you that absorbs totaling 20% of your max HP for 30 seconds. We've not had like a Mana Ward type ability. Like, Summoner personal survivability was like a qualm of mine, where I definitely felt it in Hello World in O12S, where if you had short stack as a Summoner, you were pretty much rip unless your healers were on the ball. And I remember dying a bunch just to that, and it always felt bad because, you know, use a super potion, drain, die. Nothing more you could do in that instant. But 20% of your max HP is a huge amount, especially in tandem with Galvanize and whatever the other Scholar Shield is, a Catalyze or something. I'm imagining they will stack together. And it'll be interesting to see, like, on our party UI, just how much shielding we can have at most. And we'll be able to enjoy the luxury black mages have a little.
Well, it comes at a bit of a cost, though, so you have to the opportunity cost-wise. So with your Eggy Assault for Ifrit, for example, is going to be an extra attack from your your Ifrit Eggy.
Yeah.
And if you have that presence of mind to summon Titan to save yourself, dying's a lot better than losing the pet attack, and you also might lose the pet auto too. So all in all, I think it's a really nice ability. But I'm sure there are people that'll be maybe a little hesitant to use it because they really want the pet attack. So why don't the healer heal me?
I mean, either way, it's gonna proc a Ruin 4, which is nice. Like that's one of the traits. I think at level 76, have it in the dock. You know, Eggy Assaults guarantee a Ruin 4 proc, guaranteed Ruin 4s, especially when you can stack them, as we talked about for the 3-minute meme opener.
Oh, please, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to wait for 3 minutes to pull. It's like waiting for cards.
I really like that Earthen Armor is an option for us to use during downtime. Like, say, for example, in, let's talk about fight that we've been in, you know, in UCOB with trios. Let's say you're progging that, and damage was pretty intense for mechanics, especially before the 345 gear. Imagine if you had like the opportunity to have Titan out quickly to Earthen Armor and soak up damage from like a Giga Flare or something, or maybe have a better chance of surviving things. Like, when you compare the fact that before we didn't have such an option, to me, having that kind of option in prog, or even to like survive and get a raise off, is very, very nice. I know I'm definitely gonna be thinking of, hey, I could live if I use Titan here. I know my DPS will take a hit, but I'd rather not die. I don't know what you guys feel about that, especially with your earlier prog tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Earthen Armor, for progression in particular, could see some use. Just, you know, as you said, if you need any sort of like quick survivability, if like a big raid wide's about to hit, but if, say, like you miss a sucker, like you miss some sort of heal because you were out of range, then you can try to like react and
So
basically shield yourself.
Yeah, the thing I'm wondering is how responsive the pets are going to actually be, because unlike Mana Ward, where you can kind of use it, like to panic use the Mana Ward, and even then sometimes it's not in time, and you die anyway because the game didn't detect the Mana Ward on you. But for the pet, you need to go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say they look pretty responsive in the videos,
Okay.
at least. So
Yeah.
it looks promising. Obviously, until we physically can play the game, we're never gonna be 100% sure. But at least from what we were able to see, it definitely looks like better than what it is.
Yeah, so you're gonna need a little more foresight because you still need to summon the Titan, and then you need to use the Eggy Assault. So.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to Earth and Armor yourself, but then you go, wait, my Titan's gotta finish his auto attack first. Well, guess
Oh no. Well, also another scenario is if you used all of your Eggy Assaults for damage and it's on cooldown, then the Earth and Armor will be there. So keep in mind.
But at least that's something you can plan around, and that's something I like. I like having tools that you can plan around and account for, than like needing them and not having them. And
I actually really like niche tools. Like I think it's important to have.
And the other interesting aspect of it is that with Eggy Assault, so you can see in like the top right, 2 actions has a charge time. Oh yeah, so it uses the charge system, so you could technically use it back to back. The charge time is 30 seconds. So let's say there's 2, you had Titan out to survive something, and this mechanic had 2 really hard heavy hitting AoEs. You could Earthen Armor for the first one, Earthen Armor for the second, and then you've got 2 Rune 4 stacks, and you've survived. Like, you know, that's a hypothetical. With that cooldown as well, like 30 seconds that you could potentially have a 20% shield. I forget what the cooldown on Mana Ward is right now, but I'm pretty sure that it's considerably faster. Like Earthen Armor is at 30 seconds. And Black Mages, please don't ask for us to get nerfed. I like having the option. Yes, it comes with the cost with a Titan, but 120 seconds. Yeah, that's quite a considerable difference when you consider that Mana Ward is 30%. I should remember these numbers. I'm a bit tired, but yeah. So the other Eggy Assault that we have is a new action for Garuda, one called Slipstream. Slipstream is a 20 potency target AoE and applies Evergale, which is a 20 potency dot, and it'll be Garuda scaled potency, which the ratios seem to hold. We'll need to look at that closely on launch. For 30 seconds, so that's 10 ticks, so you're effectively having 220 potency Garuda action. For AoE, certainly, if the ad lasts long enough as well, that's actually pretty damn strong for a pet action. We haven't had a pet oGCD amounting to that amount of potency ever, except for Inkindles. So like a regular one that you can use, just ad lib like that is very nice. Meanwhile, for Ifrit, Eggy, and for Titan, you have their AoE centered around themselves. You have Flaming Crush, and Mountain Buster. Favorites of mine, purely for the fishing potential, but also for how we use them in our openers to make contagion application with Garuda a bit easier for people, especially if they had delay factors to account for. I'm hoping that we can still use Flaming Crush pre-pull, not necessarily for the meme opener, but having Ruin 4s on pull is always nice, and having it be guaranteed instead of a 15% chance of fish is also nice in that regard. Now, Flaming Crush is 110 Ifrit potency, and Mountain Buster, I believe, is 70, and Ifrit and Titan share the same scaling, but Garuda's Eggy Assault 2, especially if you get the full 30-second benefit, definitely comes out on top, especially in a multi-target situation when they last long enough. So that's one consideration. But yes, the Eggies are split in such a way that Ifrit is your single target favorite. Garuda you want to prioritize for AoE. And Titan is for the defensive utility. So we've covered here, for AoE, single target, and prog and shielding. So other actions, though, there isn't an Eggy Assault 3, even though some of us have seen that Eggy Assault 3 status for Machinist. ? we no longer have the following actions. Contagion is gone. No more optimizing around contagion for you or the party. Radiant Shield is gone. Again, no more optimizing that for you and the party. Earthen Wall, which was Titan's personal mitigation buff. I mean, that's a given because Egis can't take damage anymore. Landslide, which was a stun, doesn't exist anymore. And Shockwave, Garuda's knockback, is also gone, which some tanks are probably thankful for the summoners that used to use Sick in dungeons back in the day. And you'd hear that contagion before dots are applied. Ugh. Don't want to think about that. So we mentioned that. And then the last changes for Egis are the Enkindles themselves. So we have... Now, my memory might be a bit fuzzy while I'm tired. I believe Inferno and Earthen Fury are the same potency right now. And that Aerial Blast is the one that's had like a big scaling to promote the AoE use. 350 potency per target is quite high for Garuda. If we want to like convert it into player equivalent, just to, do 80% of it. And that's a lot for an Enkindle. And Enkindles, by the way, this is one of my favorite changes of the new expansion. Gone is the annoying RNG trait that we all hated. Instead of having variable Enkindle timings that aligned with Rouse or sometimes didn't, or sometimes you had an Enkindle a minute because you were a god with procs. Now Enkindle is fixed 2 minutes. And that to me is big quality. Like, it means you can plan around when you want to use it so much better instead of, I'm dry by 3 procs here. I'm not going to get Enkindle out in time before the boss jumps, or, nonsense like that. So I think that's a very, very good change. So to answer your question, Andrew, pets have been a bit of an enigma. We've never actually figured out the formulae for them, but our approximations are that Garuda is roughly 80% of a player potency. So if Garuda's doing 100, it's like an 80 potency action on a player. And then Ifrit's is like 48% of a player by comparison. So again, if Ifrit has 100 potency action, it's like 48 potency from a player. And this is why, and this is a big thing, when people compare Egis together, they're often like, but isn't 135 more than 110? And I'm like, what if I told you it isn't? And they're just trying to understand how that possibly can be true. That's not how math works. It's because point per point, their potency into damage is not equivalent. It's not equal. And Garuda being, I would consider splitting it as caster Egis versus melee Egis. Caster pets that we have are Garuda, Bahamut, and Phoenix. At least I assume Phoenix follows the exact same template. They all have Garuda's HP, they all have Garuda's scaling. At least that's with Phoenix. I expect it to be the same. I don't see why they would change that. Maybe they have. And then your melee Egis, which are Titan and Ifrit. And this is why, when you're comparing potencies of Egis and why one is more suitable for certain scenarios than others, especially with like when we were looking at pet swaps back in 4.0, you want to make sure you have the scaling factored in so that you have a fairer comparison. Because if you're just going to look at raw potency numbers, Ifrit wins every time. And that's not the truth of it all. You want to get it as accurate as possible. At least that's my preference there. But yes, so that's Egis. I've rambled a bit there. How do you guys feel about the Eggy changes?
I like them in general. I think it's interesting that they did away with any pet swapping shenanigans, at least between Garuda and Ifrit. Garuda seems very clearly this is going to be your AoE pet. Ifrit's going to be a single target. And sometimes you'll pull out Titan because you don't want to die. So, in general, I like them. I hope they're a lot more responsive. Everybody knows the frustration of I really want my Garuda Contagion before my dots land on it, and the Garuda, it messes up. The Contagion gets messed up, and now your dots never catch Contagion again.
Hey man, that's why you study method for that Contagion. I told you about
That's true. That's true. No, I study sometimes in UCOP.
But I don't know. Like personally, I do kind of like the fact that they're trying to add use to using multiple pets. So in this case, they're trying to say, okay, if you're gonna do single target damage, you're gonna want to favor Ifrit. If you're gonna have AoE situations, then Garuda could end up being better. However, Titan's still sitting here, where it's like, well, okay, there's Earth and Armor. Well, okay, maybe in Prague it'll be kind of useful if like something bad happens, I can stay alive. But then it's like, what else does it do? Like, it's still in this kind of situation, I feel like, where you have two Egis and then there's Titan sitting off on the bench, and you're never gonna touch it outside of like some extremely niche situation.
He's the vastly inferior melee Egi when compared to like Ifrit's damage. Like his attack potency, like his passive auto that's not listed as a core GCD, that's 45 versus 60, and then you have Rockbuster, which is less than Burning Strike. So he's already really far behind just in passive damage, and then all of his other actions also do less. I mean, he only has one damaging action and then one utility action, whereas Ifrit has two. So he's already that much far behind Ifrit that like you're pretty much only bringing Titan out for his utility and not for anything else. I could argue maybe there's like a 0.01% chance that if ever you're in a pull with more than 16 mobs, that you would use his Enkindle. But then you would like, if you had something like say 30 mobs and they could somehow all fit in that tiny little pizza, because ground AoEs are special in that they don't really have a target limit as opposed to every other regular AoE, which caps at 16. Now, this is a scenario which is never going to happen because I've never seen something with more than 16.
Wait, there is a scenario. Sastasha.
Okay.
Sastasha.
You're actually right.
All those little those fire sprite things.
You're actually very right.
One of the clans.
Because like pulling everything up to that point, that's so I when I've helped Ravan with like figuring out things for ACT, Sastasha is my go-to dungeon specifically for that reason. He's like, hey Nemekh, find out like what the message is for target count for this. Like there's 16, 32 and other things to consider, and I'm like, okay, off to Sastasha I go. And that's how you find out that yes, target AoEs, Bane, etc. all cap at 16, and then they stop doing everything. And then you also learn that, this is a bit of a tangent and I apologize, but very interesting one. In Eureka, people can experience this directly, where most AoEs cap at like 32. And if you see that there are about 32 players near a monster that does AoEs around itself that hit everyone, stand further back and you won't get hit because it can't hit any more people. A little bit of tech there. I doubt it's going to come up that often, but if they ever introduce big dungeons again where that might be applicable, just remember they could always increase it, but if you stand away, it prioritizes other people, and then when it fits full, you don't get affected, so very interesting there. But yes, ground AoEs are similar in that they check for however many are in the radius, and they ignore the 16 limit, whereas everything else is 16. But besides that, I don't think Titan really has any value outside of the defensive utility. I just can't see it. Sorry, Milka, I know Titan is your beloved, but nah, he's not seeing much beyond that.
Windblade still has a cast time too?
Yes, it does.
Oh, wait. Oh, no!
I
was hoping they got rid of it,
But it's interesting because in the clips, or rather in the video footage where like Larizor was spamming Eggy assaults, the time between Windblade and say like Aerial Slash, or Windblade and Slipstream, I can't remember which one he used in like the section I'm thinking of, is very little duration. It almost seems as if like the cast time doesn't matter. So
okay, that's good at least. I mean, if they circumvented it, and at least it's not something as crucial as Contagion now.
Yeah.
So you know the dot slipstream's cool, but secondly,
I still would like Windblade to be instant just because, but I doubt it's needed now. But if we were still in a world where Contagion was something that we needed to try and align properly, I would have loved for Windblade to be instant. But
Same.
Times have changed, and Contagion no longer a thing, so we don't have to care about Garuda as much. Like I'm not gonna miss like her awkwardness, but
I like the new devotion a lot more than Contagion, to be honest. Even though it's weaker, I think Contagion is really broken in its niche. It's better trick attack, for magic damage. So I'm glad. I don't think they could have balanced that very well. So.
And I don't think like there is even a place for old school Contagion to be back. For people who may not have played back in AR upwards, for AR,
that was really cool. Getting your super buff Dreadworm Trance dots, Dreadworm Trance Try Disaster.
Yes, with Raging Strikes and everything.
With Raging Strikes and your raid buffs.
So
And my miasma too.
Yes.
Oh, and miasma too.
And miasma too. The value. Yes, old Contagion used to extend dots that you had applied by 15 seconds, and it would still retain any snapshots. There isn't really a place for that nowadays with the 30-second dots and like current rotation. It wouldn't really make sense. It'd be really awkward. But yes, Contagion no longer a thing. So people rejoice. If you hated Garuda, now you only have to use Garuda for AoE. But anyway, that's enough of Egis. Now let's talking about something we've covered a bit. We've talked about some amount of synergy, Contagion, Raging Steel, being gone. Mentioned Devotion. Devotion's had an interesting change. There we go. Here we go. Here's our party synergy and crossroll slide. So, first notable change, and with the tooltip memes, especially with, for example, how Troubadour has a 3-minute cooldown and all the other range actions have a 2-minute cooldown, I am skeptical about the legitimacy of 2-minute versus 3-minute right now. I don't think that things are stable enough for consistency. Maybe Devotion is now a 3-minute cooldown instead of 2-minute. If it is, that's, a bit of a feels bad. 3 minutes is a long ass time. But Devotion as a raid DPS buff has a considerable buff compared to what it used to be, in that now it's a 15 YARM 5% buff for 15 seconds instead of 2%, which is what it used to be. Yes, it also buffed healing and mitigation, but if you're using, there was maybe very niche scenarios where you would use the Devotion for the mitigation. I could think about that maybe for LBGs. But aside from that, you're always meant to use Devotion for raid alignment, and I know that's something that Elevation would talk about a lot with people in their logs. They'd be like, your Devotion's out of sync, get it back in line. Yeah. They'd be like, keep
your raid buffs aligned with every other raid buff, please.
You're missing your 2% potency.
I think people probably just didn't think about it as much because it's only 2%, so it was like, well, it's just kind of throwaway. Where
yes, it wasn't.
It should be on point. They just don't care enough. Now it's worth a lot. Now it's worth 5%.
Now 5% is a good deal, and it's all damage, and that's the thing to keep in mind. It doesn't have any restrictions of whether it's physical or magical. Embolden still has the physical restriction. Contagion is gone, and there's no other resistant debuffs. Those have all been removed. We do not talk about Trick Attack because somehow Trick Attack has emerged unscathed every single expansion, and I still have no idea how that is remotely possible, but Trick still exists as a 10% raid DPS cooldown, and it's been very interesting and funny to me seeing in certain channels the frenzy people would get into, ninjas, when are you tricking? What is your trick range? We need to build around your trick. And it's been like that for the past day and a half. Literally every DPS job, even healers and tanks, be like, when's trick? And work by Xiaofu, work by Kaladin, and Kaladin's been talking with me a lot. He's been sharing me his spreadsheets, and I appreciate that very much. I still think it's a bit ridiculous, but anyway, I won't turn this into why trick is very strong, but it does impact everyone. It impacts our play, impacts how we build our own rotations, especially as a job with a very strict rotational timing, and we frame it around Trick Attack. Even if Trick didn't exist, we'd still have the 60 seconds, but because 60 seconds is the same duration as Trick, that's why things somehow make sense. And, Devotion was 2 minutes, multiple of that, 3 minutes, still a multiple of that. So alignment, even though it's 3 minutes, or maybe it is 2 minutes and it's just wrong, is still very much an important thing. And at 5%, summoners, if you weren't caring about it much before, you want to care about it more, because keeping that in sync with everyone else's raid buffs is going to matter even more. And if you're wanting to get good runs for yourself and for your group, especially if you're speedrunning and optimizing, make sure you have your timings down pat. I expect Aetherpact to be more responsive if it's had any treatment like the Eggy Assaults have. If it has, that's also very nice, because we're also not going to have the situation where Aetherpact gets eaten by a sick command, or by like Radiant Shield or Contagion, which was very much, it could be a problem, and why we'd say wait until you see the Devotion Rainbow or before you hit sick, for example. If Aetherpact functions better, then, you know, the timings are going to be much nicer to keep in sync too. But yes, Devotion is one of the stronger raid DPS cooldowns now, especially in a world where many have been removed. Like Bard has had its raid DPS utility gutted.
Machinist lost hypercharge.
Yeah, see, this makes us look really good by comparison, but I'm really wondering. I don't want to derail the stream, but really wondering what the incentive is to take Bard and Machines.
I mean, they have the strong defensive cooldowns, but, you know, there's a lot of other changes in cross rolls with like refresh and such. And you can see on this page as well, Lucid, this is a bit of a tangent, but I'll seg into it. Lucid exists, and Lucid's cooldown is now 60 seconds. We don't have refresh anymore. And it was mentioned earlier again, how we don't get mana from Aetherflow, we don't get mana from Energy Drain, but Lucid, 60 seconds? That's a lot of mana every minute when you consider it's 21 seconds of 80 refresh potency, which is probably... I mean, I don't know how much 80 refresh is in the 10k MP world, but it's gonna keep us mana positive as long as we don't die over and over and over and over. And, like, refresh having gone, you know, healers are gonna have to think more about their GCD use. We can't even mana shift them. They're gonna have to probably consider more piety. Like, there's all these knock-on impacts into raiding, and with that defensive bias for like range, and then you're looking at, say, oh, but for our DPS, Summoner looks pretty good now. I mean, Summoner had reasonable raid DPS contributions before with Contagion, Radiant Shield, and Devotion all together, and with pet swaps you could gain a mix of all of them depending on downtime or the openers. But now it's just Devotion, and yeah, sure, we've taken a little hit in our DPS with a lack of Contagion and a lack of Radiant Shield, but 5% for all kinds of damage is good. For 15 seconds, it's still longer than a trick window. So Summoner in that regard is going to look more appealing.
I think it's similar to Monk and Red Mage now. Maybe if it's 3 minutes, it's gonna be a little weaker than Monk, even with its Omni damage. It's twice as frequent.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
But all in all, I think in the new world, it looks pretty good. I know Trick still exists, but that's like the only heavy support that exists now. Aside from...
And another interesting one that SD mentioned in chat, Faux Requiem, that's also gone now, and to me, it's difficult thinking of a timeline where Foe doesn't exist, especially when you consider what original Foe was for us and how significant that was with Battle Voice, where, you know, the 10% magic damage increase suddenly 20%.
The Heavensward foes.
Wait, foes existed in Heavensward? I never noticed when I played.
Oh, maybe that's because you never got it.
my bard never played foes for me.
See, my bard was I actually had an audio trigger just for her, because whenever she used Battle Voice, I would say in the audio trigger, Battle Voice, please, no ballad, because she would always Battle Voice ballad, and I'd just be like crying every time. Reopener, Battle Voice is used on ballad in downtime, and I'm like, there was no need. Feels very, very bad not having your 20% magic damage increase in your very strong reopener with Raging Strikes and everything. Very feels bad. But if you didn't have a bard, unless you were the god of Summoner, Molly Pop, getting very high percentiles without a bard and foe was very tough, because just having one made such a difference from all the stacked multipliers. But if you were Molly, you know, maybe it was a bit different.
That whole I still remember that whole argument you had with me too.
It was a very interesting argument. about for Requiem and the ability to pass well with or without. But Foe is a thing of the past. We're in a new timeline now where bards don't give us that, so we don't have to want bards all the time. No refresh. But yes, let's talk about the other changes. So I believe the other actions are still the same. Addle, and I think has Addle been reduced by 5%? Or was
No,
it
it was always
10%.
in Stormblood.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
like Virus then. Swift cast still insta cast every minute. Big
Surecast got nerfed though.
Surecast
Yeah,
got
it's
heavily
It's a
nerfed.
2-minute cooldown as opposed
4
to a
times
30
the
second.
cooldown. Yeah. So you have to think a little bit more about it, but I think in reality there were very few fights where the 2-minute wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah, and
So,
I would say also having it at 30 seconds made some fights ridiculously trivial. It's like maybe not so much contemporary ones, but I mean even then, if you consider like the recast of Arm's Length and such, or even for the jobs that didn't have knockback prevention, we could surecast every knockback on Clown Kefka, for example, but I don't think every melee could. I'm not sure if that's correct, but having it on 30 seconds was so incredibly powerful that literally it made mechanics so brain dead. I don't know if people remember in 4.0, surecast wasn't 30 seconds, it was longer, and it was just enough. I think it was a minute, and it was just enough to say like on X-Death, not Neo, but X-Faust.
Well, you couldn't cast with Surecast back then, remember?
Yeah,
If you were to
couldn't.
start casting, it would remove the buff, so you actually had to stop casting.
Sheds of Ruin too.
And what was it? Vacuum Blade or Vacuum Wave, the one where he knocked you back, he'd teleport, reappear, and then he'd push everyone back. You know, it aligned for all of those in that fight, but having like a minute for some fights, like I forget the timings of Graven's, but I can just imagine a 2-minute one would be like, oh shit, now I have to position myself properly now. It was a bit of a crutch in that sense, but you know, it's a powerful tool and we made good use of it. But yeah, Surecast in Suzaku, like there are so many pull ins and pull outs that you can do it for every single one. You can't do that now at 2 minutes, and so you have to remember not to be too close to the middle or too far close to the edge. And I guess, you know, having to do things properly, but it was nice not having to think as much in that regard. But maybe it was a bit too strong. I think it was a bit too strong at 30, but I think 2 minutes is a bit too harsh.
I agree. I think it's in a good place now.
But
I think the real tragedy. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say the other change as well is a Surecast duration actually did get a slight buff, where instead of 5 seconds it's 6 seconds. That might not matter. Maybe it will for like a mechanic that pulses over 2 ticks, but you know, that's another change to make note of. Sorry, go ahead now.
I think the real tragedy is everybody got hit in utility in general for the DPS. But we did lose Mana War, or not Mana War. We did lose
APOC,
Mana Shift. Erase was kind of memey. I mean, maybe you say somebody once in a blue moon with Erase. And the other two.
I was a big Erase fan. Man, getting day 1 100% gold healing with Erase.
Nobody really used Break or Drain.
No. Like Drain had oh sorry.
But the first 3, like, they were definitely useful, so kind of sad to see them go.
Like, not having APOC, but it's interesting in that tanks have these, like, targeted mitigation cooldowns for other people now, instead of, like, us having the 10%, like, magic reduction. I think all tanks have a 10% targeted other that maybe is also on themselves. I haven't looked too much into detail, but I remember browsing some of them. So it's interesting to see that mitigation priority has been shifted elsewhere rather than being cut out entirely. I guess maybe they do want us to prioritize more on DPSing, but we still have Addle, and Addle is still a very powerful cooldown. Still want to make good use of it. There have been a lot of defensive changes with other jobs too. Like, for example, White Mage is basically the defensive healing god with its level 80 action. 20 seconds out of 120, 30 arm radius around the cells. They have these wings, and these wings give everyone 10% less damage taken. 10% mitigation for 20 seconds out of 120. That's a lot of like defensive uptime in my mind, as well as a lot of healing increase too, which may not matter as much, but I definitely think, you know, it's going to be very, very strong for progression. I mean, especially with all the other tools that we still have. But yeah, the utility definitely has taken a hit. Drain didn't really have that much use. I did like using it in Eureka to meme, like if I was doing a Fate and I got to low HP because I didn't have a healer in the party or I was solo, and then I would unsync and then I would drain a monster and instantly heal to full from like 10 HP just because one GCD with a CDH for like 50k. You know, that was an ish scenario where I did like Drain. Drain did save my ass a few times in like some prog runs, but that was more like, where's the healing? But aside from that, like as you said, Drain and Break you weren't really using. You didn't want to use them in raids. Not DPS good, unless you wanted to remember what it was like casting original Ruin 1 at 80 potency, like Ruin 1 Simulator. But yeah, that's it for the party synergy and cross rolls. So now that we've basically talked about all of the changes, or most of them, there are some extra details which you can find in the document, which I'll link again. Should have a bot to link it or something. And again, if anyone spots any inconsistencies or any errors that need correcting, just either give me a shout on Discord or on the Reddit or whatever, and I'll like amend. But this is the doc for the preliminary 5.0 changes. Has more details than what's in these slides, but they mostly share the same info. So with all of that tied together, so many changes. What now? What do you guys think about how Summoner is going to feel? And I know some of you have done some musing on the future of the Summoner rotation, and how things have changed. So I don't know who would like to go first with that.
Well, in some ways, it's not going to change too much if you try to think about it. It's going to be basically what we imagine to be a 2-minute rotation cycle, which is what we have now. Still don't know how to feel about Dry Room Trance and Phoenix Trance sharing a cooldown. You know, like we said earlier, when we found that out today, that just that threw off a lot of ideas that we had.
I think it all functioned very similarly to what we have today, which is unfortunate in the sense that I was hoping for something really different. And 1 minute, the 1 minute rotation was like the dream, but that's okay. Like, it's still cool. I think the pet reworks are very good. I think the Ruin 4 banking is really good for
that's my favorite change. Like, my favorite change by far for like surprises was the Ruin 4 stacking.
I like that too, to be honest.
It's a pretty big deal for optimization.
Yeah, for optimization, I think there's a lot of opportunities to make good use of it, especially with the fact that Ruin 2 is so low now compared to all the other GCDs, that Ruin 2 replacements with a Ruin 4 are going to be even more valuable. So good Ruin 4 use. Like, I'm liking that skillful use of GCDs is going to matter again. I can't say like how much it made me feel sad that, let's just say, when there are such things where you could get, was it a 95 or 97th percentile summoner pass, like pre-echo, but when everyone had BIS and such, and you could get that with less than 85% GCD uptime, that made me go, what the fuck? And I don't know if he's still watching, but I know there's one person who's very familiar with this case. Because I remember... Yes, it is, Boogie. Yes, this is your meme. I was just always thinking, like, god damn, what kind of situation are we in that GCDs are so bad that you can literally do 8 oGCDs in a row and lose so much GCD, like, repeatedly, just be really inefficient with your GCDs, and in the end, it somehow doesn't even matter, and I'm thinking, really? Like, how is that not punishing to like your end total? And you know what it was? Like, I don't know if you want to post it, Mugi, but feel free. Actually, DM it to me and I'll post it because I don't know if it will let you. Oh, I don't have a bot anyway, so it should be fine. But it is a very powerful meme. It doesn't mention who it is. We're not gonna name and shame, but if there is ever a time where I would get angry at the state of things, like I actually was talking to Machinist Fox, Fox Dio, and I remember he got very surprised. He's like, "Damn, you're such a nice guy. I didn't realize you could flame so badly." I'm like, it annoys me so much. This is a thing. Literally, the damage was in Festus Deathless Morns, like CDHing all the time, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That's another argument for another day. I don't want to talk about variants or anything, but the fact that GCD uptime matters more, I think, is very good in the sense that, yes, while it might widen the DPS disparity, which, by the way, was not even solved square, the extreme DPS disparity was still a thing because you can't make people do things. They have to want to be able to touch things of their rotation. They have to be wanting to live and whatnot. When you analyze, like with Ziva, for example, we looked at a lot of very interesting cases for like what might trigger or flag major suggestions, and we found logs of people, very strange things were happening and they hadn't died, and we were like, well, what's going on? They like, our only like logical conclusion was maybe they were AFK or they were watching Netflix on the other screen, like, or maybe they were just talking to someone. Like, I have no idea what could, but to me, like, that's not even remotely close to standard levels of play. And I don't know, like, I'm glad that skill is going to matter more with GCD use as summoner. I did not like the state of it in 4.0, and I'm saying this as someone who already like suffered. Like, my GCD uptime is not fantastic. Cliffing is annoying playing from hyping, but so like not being able to do as many like good GCD hardcasts is obviously going to affect me more than someone who's able to get more. Like, that's fine, I accept that fact, but I'd rather the people who are more skillful be more defined by their skill than by sheer luck. That doesn't matter. Like, I don't know.
I agree with that statement.
It's a beef of mine. I want skill to matter more, and it looks like that we are heading towards a timeline where rotational skill and like GCD uptime and hell, slide casting again. People are gonna have to slide cast more, and I'm excited about that. No more just Ruin 2 lol memes. Like,
that being said, I think that there's enough Eggy assaults and just also the 15% proc still exists that most of the time, you're gonna have a Ruin 4 to move.
Yeah.
And in fact, you might even be able to expend some of them drain bait buffs to gain a little bit of efficiency.
Yeah, and Sly was, I remember Sly was replying to the thread with the doc on Reddit, and he's talking about how, like, it's going to be more about a goal of minimizing Ruin 2s, and now with the forced Ruin 4s and the procs, and the instacasts and the trances, etc., that you're going to have very few Ruin 2s compared to, like, the current scenario where people even have more Ruin 2s than Ruin 3s. Like, if you have that kind of ratio that people are doing now in 5.0, your DPS is going to tank so hard. And I'm kind of glad that that's going to happen, because people are going to have to relearn what it meant to be a caster. I mean, yes, we have a lot of instacasts, but good casting practices. Yeah,
I think fundamentals are going to matter more.
But see, they make good changes with GC. And then they proceed to give us Bahamut and Phoenix, and they dumb it down. Because they say, you know what, we're not going to let you get worm waves off GCDs anymore. So we're just going to make it super simple. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So while we get on the GCD front, the general core mechanics were simpler, and I think that was very intentional. They wanted to consolidate any skills that's had to much smaller.
And as much as I know that people miss the mana management from Heavensward, I mean, not everyone does, but a lot of people did. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, like doing that kind of mental math and knowing what I could get away with Rune 3 casts versus Rune 1s. But I think that the opportunity to optimize with Rune 4s, it's not the same, but it's like a similar kind of consideration where proper use is going to define like more how much better someone will do than someone who's just doing it YOLO. And I like having those opportunities. It's nice to be able to like do these things and be rewarded for it. It's nice to be rewarded for like good plays. I don't know if there were any other like rotational facets. I know that you made an image, Ellie, for how a rotation might look like. Did you make an updated one, or are you okay with like that one being posted? Or shown,
I
rather.
uploaded the second one, I believe.
Oh, did you? Let me see. Oh, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I see it now. Okay, so I'm gonna drag this. So here's like an example of what a rotation structure might look like for 5.0, given all that we know now, especially with the hard lock of Dreadworm Trance and Phoenix Trance sharing the same cooldown, because that's literally everything that defines our timings is all based on Dreadworm Trance now. So I'm gonna bring this over here. So here's an example, and you can see like proposed timings, especially with what we believe so far are when Trick might happen. I know that that's still something being discussed. I think it's being like refined more with the Ninja players. I know I've seen a lot of talk about it from Kimmy, from Shinda, from Kaladin, and everyone. I know when that's more settled, people will be able to like plan more about how to frame their rotation around it. At least I think this is showing up. Yeah, it is showing up.
Yeah, because they were asking us earlier whether we want 4th or 5th GCD, and I told them 5th would most likely be preferable for us.
Yeah. So we're still a burst class, as you can see. We have a lot of filler time, unfortunately, because it's a 2-minute cycle.
Yeah,
but I mean, it is what it is.
More filler than a Shonen Jump anime. It makes me feel sad that it's like that. And the spacing and like pacing is gonna feel a bit. But at the same time, I do like the fact that the filler is going to promote good GCD practices. At least that's what my goal would be. I want to make that filler not feel as bad by like using the tricks of the trade to make it be more nuanced than just literally Rune 3 spam over and over and over, or heaven forbid Rune 2 spam running for mechanics. I'd rather use my Rune Force and Slide Cast. I'd rather have like my goal be 0 Rune 2s if I can help it. Or very, very few. Like that should be the goal. And I know similarly in 4.0, back when we still had mana management for Dreadworm Trance, one of the goals still was, again, minimizing Rune 2s, but you still had to use them for Bahamut. But another goal was trying to make it so that you didn't need to cast a single Rune 1. That was a fun game to play, a very hard game to play, and kind of impossible if you didn't have a ranged player for Refresh, because mana was very like intensive by comparison. But yes, like filler being more nuanced with the Eggy Assaults and random procs and Rune 3 filler. Dot timings, we'll see how things are gonna like pan out, if it's gonna be awkward or if these timings will be nice. I know various jobs are wondering, oh, these trick timings are awkward. Can you drift a little? Can you like have the Chinese mentality and drift a little so we can drift with you?
Yeah, we're gonna be drifting by a couple of, or a second or two, just because of the GCD and animation lock.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the NGA community. NGA community are very, very like dedicated to everything they look into. I don't know if anyone's watching from there, but I've appreciated all the interactions I've had with you guys so far. I know you're looking forward to whenever our materials come out, because they're several patches behind, but they still look to what we do, take inspiration, but then they have their own concepts and things to follow, like Chinese limit break stuff that they've done for previous runs, for new records and things. It's been very interesting hearing their thoughts on Summoner. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing what they believe will happen with 5.0 Summoner. I mean, I like hearing what anyone has to say. Japan as well. I'll be looking out to see if Miyabi, Marco, etc. are saying anything on their lodestones or on Twitter about their rotations, because it will be good to get that group feedback on what we settle on is actually good rotation for 5.0. It's not the expansion yet, and there's still a month to go until we actually play, and playtesting is going to be huge. Just not feely-craft, but feeling out how everything fits together is really important part of the learning process, in my opinion. Because if it doesn't feel good, then you're wondering, like, why am I doing this? But if it doesn't feel good, but it's mathematically correct, that's one thing. But, like, usually, if it doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel right, that's usually a sign that it's not actually ideal. And I'm looking forward to working with everyone on balance, my server and various other places, just to see what we can come up with, because ultimately at the end of the day, I know my goal is for there to be the best information possible for people who want to play Summoner, whether it's at a more gradual pacing or whether it's at the very high end. Everyone can have questions that can be answered if you just think about it for a while, do a bit of work on it. And I think together, like, there's a lot of potential in what we can solve this time around. And I'm looking forward to 5.0 specifically far more than how 4.0 was. And I hope, the Bahama, it never happens again that we have a situation where Summoner is the least played job in the entire game. I do not ever want to...
Everybody remembers 4.0 Summoner.
Like, my server, when I was still playing on Exodus, I was in a casual raiding group, and my server still didn't have a single Summoner clear of Neo X Death by week 10. And...
That's pretty rough.
Yeah, and I had the servers first in my casual group, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? And everyone who did was, like, usually on Red Mage. And there were even more Black Mage clears on Neo X Death at the time than Summoner. And I'm like, I don't... Like, this was even before 4.1, so this was still back when the rotation still felt really bad. And, you know, I didn't want to, like, finish Delta as a Red Mage. And I'm like, I want to be a Summoner. Nothing against Red Mage, it's just once a Summoner main, always a Summoner main for me. And I felt really bad about not sticking to my roots for Delta. And I don't ever want to see, like, that happen again, where come Eden, Tier 1, Summoner is dead last. Summoner is in a much better position now compared to back then. And I know I'm looking forward to seeing Summoner be very competitive, especially in meta considerations. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on and look forward to. I know you guys, I assume most, if not all of you, are going to try and do week 1 clears. Sorry.
I mean, I'm world progging, so yeah.
I'll be aiming for week 1 as well, so I'm very excited for the next expansion.
I'll probably be taking it slow.
I have no idea what mine is because I'm still not in a stable group myself yet. Still trialing out since I've come back from my hiatus. But I think one of the groups that I had been considering is looking forward to trying a week 1 clear. And if it goes to plan, then, you know, I've always said to myself, like, people said, oh, Nem, you're just a casual player. And I'm like, I don't mind, like, taking a casual pacing to clearing, but if I'm in a group that wants to week 1, I'll play hard. And I'm happy to do so. So if that happens, you know, it'll be nice. If it doesn't, I don't mind. Like, I'm fine with taking it slower too. But again, I want to see Summoner thrive. That's my main concern. I want to see people love Summoner like I have loved Summoner for basically all of the time I've played this game. And yeah, what are you all looking forward to then? Moving on, we've talked about the rotation a bit, but what are you looking forward to for Summoner in 5.0?
Mostly just learning I'm looking forward to optimizing, especially the movement part. But actually, speaking of raid, I actually have raid right now, so I have to go.
Oh no, you're fine. I know.
Feels bad.
Shinryu, I know you
Yeah.
mentioned that you like had raid considerations as well. Do you need to vanish as well, or?
And it's okay if this goes on a little longer.
Okay, as long as it's not like holding back your groups. Eydis, thank you very much for being with us for the 2 hours 15 minutes that the stream has been going on for. Definitely your insights have been very valuable, and as always, I'm looking forward to working with you for the future Summoner Theory crafting. So you have fun with your raid. Good luck.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Good, I'm glad. All right, catch you later, Eydis.
Yeah, good luck in
Okay.
UCOB tonight.
Oh yeah, we're about to clear, so.
Oh, clear.
Nice.
Definitely clear. And to quote Ellie, don't choke.
Hopefully
Yeah.
not.
Don't choke, Alan. Get that rank 1 that, was taken away from you last night.
Oh no, the bard, the puddles.
Man, I'm still tilted thinking about that.
All right, yeah, thanks for having me, and it's been a lot of fun both on stream and theory crafting.
Definitely. And we might, depending on like if people enjoyed this and if they would like to hear more in the future, especially as we iron out things and talk about other things that are happening, can always consider future episodes. But this is the first one I've tried, so I'm glad people have stayed throughout so far. But yeah, Shinryu and Ellie, what are you guys looking forward to with the next expansion for Summoner?
Well, I'm looking forward to possibly the chance of actually playing Summoner in Prague and not Red Mage, because obviously for cases like World Prague, groups do tend to favor the raised utility that Red Mage brings, and now that Summoner in a way is actually getting buffed in that regard, it leads to better opportunity to like actually just say, I can play Summoner and still have very, very good rage utility for my group. So it'll be interesting in that regard, and I do hope I'm actually able to play it a bit more than I was for AlphaScape, because basically AlphaScape was Red Mage until I cleared out 12, and it was like when we were ready to clear Final Omega, that's when I got to play Summoner, because we just favored the damage at that point, and we expected everyone would be consistent enough with the mechanics.
Yeah, I know I felt, granted, I wasn't going at the same kind of pacing as you did, but if I wasn't progging as a summoner, it didn't feel right to me, because this is the job that I wanted to main, this is the job I wanted to play, regardless of like meta considerations. This is a job I wanted to like, I want to say one trick, but if there's a job I wanted to do as good as I could on, it would be summoner, and it's just the one that I love, like the concept behind. Granted, it's a bit all over the place mechanically, but I've always enjoyed playing mages in games, and Summoner is the one I prefer the most out of all the casters, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So progging as Summoner will definitely be like a nice experience in a 5.0 for sure.
That's how it's always been for me. Like, I strongly considered going Red Mage at the start of 4.0 just because of the state Summoner was in, but I ended up just sticking with it because I wanted to play Summoner.
You're a braver man than I was for that time. But I'm glad that you stuck through it, because we got to see Summoner get back in form, and there might be... Oh, sorry.
Honestly, I didn't mind it that much. I like it because it still had the MP mana.
And we still had... Excuse me. We still had like like the thing with Summoner is that it wasn't so much the damage that was the problem. I mean, yeah, you could argue there were some FFLogs memes back then. There were a lot of FFLogs memes back then, actually, like, which hurt the perception of Summoner DPS in Deltascape, dots in particular. But damage was still pretty decent for the job. It's just it was extremely punitive, and the community perception was that Summoner was too Galaxy Brain to execute for the effort that it required. And I don't want people to think that's the case for Shadowbringers. I don't think they will think it's the case, but a lot of that is also on disseminating good resources in a manner that's not going to scare people away. And that's something we can definitely try and like adjust the narrative of for the next expansion. And like I said, I want people to enjoy like progging as I want people to enjoy progging as whatever job they enjoy personally, but I'm biased to Summoner, so pick Summoner.
I think it was fair to say though that like at the start of 4.0, it was actually very punishing for Summoner if you died.
Yes.
Because that was before they had fixed the MP costs on your pets, for example. And that was like one of the things that even in Heavensward could actually make Summoner very bad in prog, and like the situation of if you died and say you don't have your Aetherflow to pop when you raise, you were then in a situation where you basically decided, okay, do I cast my pet or do I cast dots? And whichever
Dots,
one
yeah.
you did, you couldn't do the other.
Yeah, you just had to like stand around and like you kind of want to use that ruin one, but then you're like, but if I ruin one, I'm not gonna have MP to do the other thing I need, and then you wait for Aetherflow and you pray. And that was another change back in 4.0, which also hurt, was Aetherflow used to return 20% of your max MP. In 4.0, it was changed to return 10%, and that was painful. I remember like feeling that difference too, and thinking, wait a minute, why is it 10%? Was it more for Scholar? I don't know, but it affected both Scholar and Summoner, and deaths were still very punitive. The summon mana cost was high. It was still a 6-second base cast spell, which if you didn't have swift cast and mechanics were going off, then your pet might get interrupted, and it's just annoying. Annoying would be putting it nicely. But it has changed to be, I mean, there's still punishing aspects. Being a 2-minute rotation is still going to be a bit punishing. But
well, right, because like if you die, like say you die in already Shadowbringers Trance, well now you lose your Aether, and then you lose the ability to even use Bahamut, and so you're gonna lose a Phoenix to boot because of that as well. So there are still punishing aspects, but at the very least, if you die, you can at least raise. You'll have MP to summon your pet and at least start casting, and that's better than it was in the past.
And I think as well that I'm not sure if this interaction will be the case, but let's say you'd finished a Bahamut and you died like after, and you lose your Phoenix like Ether, so you can't Phoenix Trance. I think even with that in mind, your cooldown would revert to Dreadworm Trance, so you could still kind of like, you wouldn't be as punished as losing the whole cycle. You're just losing half of it, if that makes sense. So that, I'm not sure if that will be the case mechanically, but it would be like, it's nicer when jobs aren't ridiculously more punishing just because of the rotation mechanics. There should be punishment for death, but when you're already thrown weakness and 20% of your max HP and MP and all these other things, 2-minute base cycles makes you wonder. But you can also argue it does encourage, if you want to do well, to just play cleaner, because playing a job that gets punished that much from a death, you want to make sure you never die, and that kind of encourage wanting to get good, in other words. And
that's true.
And I think that's an important aspect too, is respecting what needs to be respected, and also like knowing how to toe the line between greed and optimizing. Be like, if I timed this a bit earlier, I would have survived, as opposed to just like not moving at all. But it's interesting to like think about it in that way. There was a question in chat earlier, or other something mentioned about thoughts on pet swapping. We talked about it a little bit. I wonder what you guys think about maybe the idea of pet swapping, ignoring Titan in like downtime and such.
I mean, I was honestly gonna say downtime in the open is at least what seems clear right now. And by that I mean pre-pull Garuda, you Windblade because you'll just basically gain a pet attack. Probably use Slipstream because it is such high potency, and then swap in the Ifrit. Is kind of the idea that I have in my head right now. I know people brought up the Aerial Blast and the fact that it will be more potency than Ifrits. There are two things that I see with that, though, that I guess kind of go against. And one is, again, the fact that Windblade has a cast time. And I know you had mentioned earlier that it at least appeared in videos that pets are casting abilities without all of the delay that they seem to have right now. And so if that's the case, it may alleviate the problem. But the issue that I see, at least with the way Garuda currently works, is that if you use Enkindle, and with the way that she'll cast a Windblade and then clip her auto attack to use an ability like Enkindle, there is a chance that she just loses an auto attack outright. And that's actually one of the issues that Garuda has. If you compare like her auto attack timeline compared to Ifrit, is that Garuda will lose auto attacks over time compared to Ifrit, simply because when she's weaving her abilities, she clips her auto, whereas Ifrit, especially if you play on Obey, Ifrit doesn't really clip the auto.
Yeah.
And so if you're attempting to use Garuda for Aerial Blast, but then she clips her auto and say that you end up losing an auto attack because of that, it ends up becoming worse automatically, simply because even though the Aerial Blast has more damage, you lose the auto attack. And so it becomes worse.
I suppose like the main consideration, as always, and this is also like the exception to the rule of like Enkindle for alignment. Not that it really happened that often, but like Aerial Blast is the easier like Enkindle to to AoE with in multiple target situations. Like the cone, if it's facing the wrong way and you just miss everything except the one target, that's annoying. Shouldn't really happen, but there are times where I've just seen the cone go into Narnia and I'm like, god damn it. But multiple target with Aerial Blast, it's very strong base potency target AoE with no fall off. So I guess there could be swap scenarios where if Enkindle is available, and it would be more of a gain to use it in there, which it pretty much would be, unless you like needed to push or needed to cleave with it. Just hitting a ton of stuff, if the timing allows, could argue it's padding. I would argue it's efficient use of GCD of cooldowns. But...
Oh yeah, for AoE, like you'd certainly want an Aerial Blast. I guess I was speaking more towards like single target use, and that's where again that issue of the whole Windblade and will Garuda lose an auto attack because she casts it. The second thing though is aligning Enkindles in the raid. And that's something that like I've always been very anal about towards people, is like it's not just about aligning Enkindle with like your Rouse, which is like how it's been now and how it was in Heavensward, but you want to hit Trick Attack. Like you want to hit all of the raid buffs that are available to you. And so while yes, Garuda's Aerial Blast is, well, the pet potency looks to be listed at a 50 potency gain, but I know when it's broken down into the damage modifiers, it's going to be like a little bit less. But by the time that you account for Ifrit's Enkindle hitting like Trick Attack, hitting maybe an Astro card because they're going to start playing solo cards, or a Dancer buff, like if you have all those raid buffs available to you, it's probably still likely that Ifrit's Inferno will end up outweighing Aerial Blast, assuming that Inferno hits raid buffs. And you probably won't want to hold Enkindle or hold Garuda out for that long to Aerial Blast on the raid buffs, because you're going to take the potency loss on having her Windblade, which is very, very weak, as opposed to having Burning Strikes. And I assume her base auto attack still exists as well.
Yeah. It's
for Ifrit.
Oh, for Ifrit, well, I'm assuming it does. I mean, we can easily check that and compare the potencies, but 135 Burning Strike, 60 attack. That's what I've got listed. Whether that's still the case or not, to be confirmed. But it looked like it's still definitely a thing. You can go for footage and double check. But I do.
Is the pet summon still on the GCD, even though it's instant?
It's an off GCD.
It's an oGCD, which is nice. So, like, if you did want a pet swap, for example, let's say you used an Eggy Assault, get your Ruin 4, use your Ruin 4, and then weave and summon a new pet, and then use, like, another Eggy Assault action after. You could definitely do that, and it would be interesting to see just how how little we can try to lose in swapping pets in that regard. I do believe the main use case for swaps, aside from like, you know, mentioned downtime and such, if they're promoting as much AoE as they are, then AoE phases still want Garuda out, just because the difference in the total wind blades hitting so much, the total slipstreams hitting so much, the total aerial slashes hitting so much, it's gonna add up quite quickly. Especially when you consider that the main AoE rule for this expansion seems to be the rule of 3, where AoE abilities are generally better to use than like standard ones when there's 3 or more targets. Like that seems to be quite a typical rule. Just look, especially in like summoner actions. So if there so happens to be quite a lot of cases of 3 or more targets, then, you know, it's encouraging Garuda more and more, for at least for those phases or those scenarios. It's one of those things to just think about. Be interesting to see. Excuse me.
It'll probably just end up coming down to the pet autos on single target, like if you lose them or not, and then on like AoE, like you said.
I appreciate this meme, SD. Very much so.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that we had. If we swap the Ifrit, does the pet auto attack timeline, like, are the auto attacks shared on the same? Because if they are, then we would have to plan the weave specifically to where Garuda would Windblade, and then in between like that remaining GCD time for the pet, we'd have to weave Ifrit there, so that way you wouldn't actually lose the auto attack when Ifrit summon.
Yeah, like
or clip it by any way.
We talk about GCD uptime in general for players, but pet uptime is also incredibly important. And as much as sometimes people try and think, oh, Egis are a bit of a hassle, I just rather cast them, forget them, and like, you know, sick away. If you wanted to like optimize summoner, you had to care about that stuff as much as your own uptime. Try to minimize like the losses, like, you know, how we talk about in Chattanooga and O6S, and the tricks Marco would employ to make sure that he barely lost any autos as Chattanooga would move to a different part of the arena. You know, just trying to make sure that the uptime is kept there. I mean, melee DPS talk about it all the time. We talk about it for GCDs, but why not pets too? Like, I think, you know, it still matters. And that's reminded me with Ziva, we need to have like a pet uptime module for like a timeline to see where the gaps are. But I digress. Definitely a lot of interesting things have been learned today with how the future is going to look. I don't know if anyone in the chat has any questions for any of us, or just anything they have on their mind. There's been a couple of things mentioned, and I've tried to keep tabs on chat so far. But if anyone has any queries and such, feel free to ask now. But if not, I can start rounding off, because we have been at this for a good while, and I don't want to bore people for too much longer. It has been a good run.
Okay, we got a few now.
There's a few now. Do you think Titan Eggy was given proper justice in his retooling?
No.
No.
Not entirely, no. I like the defensive utility, but he doesn't do enough. Like, it's... I mean, I guess you could still troll people with his Enkindle, like Milka would do in Titan phase for Uwu, where you would just make a pizza around the time when jails would have to be resolved and scare people that way. But or Earthshakers in trios. I know. I think he also did that too. 10 strike was better timing. Yeah. But
honestly, if they're gonna try to promote Titan to have this kind of defensive utility and have it kind of based around that, and not so much like trying to utilize its skills for full uptime in the same way that like they're trying to create for Ifrit and Garuda, then honestly I want to see Titan just have group wide utility and not just have like a personal shield, but like start applying it to party members.
It'd be interesting then if, for example, let's say, instead of having Mountain Buster as his other Egis, so let's say hypothetically he had like a either however many percent for either the nearest or everyone in the party, and it didn't stack with like the main 10% personal one. Like having his like if you were to focus on the pure defensive aspect, then Mountain Buster makes no sense to me. But it makes more sense in, like, as Milka's suggesting, like, if Titan's autos were the same potency as Ifrit's, and you just change the Eggy assaults, then he would be more viable in that regard, especially with no enmity modifiers, because he's not tanking. So there could be, like, a balancing in Titan use then. I don't know if Square Enix want him to be used more so like that. I don't think he should have the same, like, melee potential fully as Titan, but, if they were wanting to like go down the more defensive route, then it would be interesting maybe instead of like Mountain Buster there was something else, and that way, like, yes, he would have his Rock Buster auto, but his Eggy assaults would be purely utility. That could be interesting to me.
I think that would be a good change, because then it'd be useful. And like, if they wanted to give like more utility, then sure, the damage is okay, but as it is, like, he's barely useful. It's just for the niche situations where he would save you.
Yeah, like,
and the downtime, of course.
And before, like, with Mountain Buster, like, Mountain Buster was interesting, you know, you had your fishes with it for Ruin 4 and such, but, Mountain Buster was also actually a pretty damn good enmity, in terms of, like, damage to enmity. It had a 10 times modifier on Mountain Buster, and it was AoE, so, like, if you were tanking and, you know, you'd Mountain Buster on over and over, like, keeping the uptime on that, excuse me, would help keep, you know, the ad pack on Titan as opposed to like some trickling away and trying to hit you. I mean, granted, summon potency has gone a bit ridiculous, so that would have happened anyway. But like in that regard, back then, fine. But with no enmity modifiers, like his actions don't make sense to me because they were held back purely because the enmity modifiers on them meant that in terms of enmity worth, they did so much more hate than Ifrit's autos would ever do. Like, literally many multiples times. And that's why, like, say, back in the old days with Rouse Spur, if you wanted a good aggro lead on Titan, you'd Rouse Spur and, like, you do all of the actions, have the huge modifiers multiplied by both buffs together, and, you know, he would have considerable hate lead. But his current incarnation doesn't make that much sense. I think that was a pretty good question, because it's something to think about with what they're going to do in the future. Whether they keep him as is or whether they change him. It would be nice if they did make him a bit more like usable. Otherwise it's like, what's the point aside from the, you know, one survival case? But the point that, you know, Square doesn't want to actually make him more viable, that might be true. Like, it's hard to say, because that'd be something to ask Yoshida, like, what would they plan for the Eggies? Because they have, like, clear distinct roles, but Garuda's good for AoE, if it's good for single target, Titan's not that good for defense. Like, yes, the cooldown is good, but it's just for you. It doesn't, like, help anyone else. But, okay, the next question. Would you rather fight one Bahamut-sized Ifrit Eggy or 10 Ifrit Eggy-sized Bahamuts?
Well, I keep my Bahamut size on small, so I'm gonna go with the one Bahamut-sized Ifrit.
How about you, Shinryu?
I don't know.
It's a tough question.
It's not something I've ever thought about.
I personally would like to be swarmed with Ifrit-sized Bahamuts. I would collect them all and befriend them. And, I don't know, just go places. Be like, the new Pokemon game where you have your Pokemon walking beside you.
Some people are displeased by the fact that I use Bahamut size on small,
I, mean,
apparently.
I agree with Milka. Why are you use Bahamut size small?
Why not?
I prefer Bahamut size large. Personally, you gotta have my dragons big. But
honestly, I've tried small and I just don't notice that he's out. So I have to use large.
It was an interesting change though, because I remember all the complaints of people saying, "Oh my god, Bahamut's too big. I can't see him do mechanics." The only legitimate recent case of that, which I think is fair, isn't even to do with Bahamut's size. It was Morn for Titan jumps is the one that I kept hearing people complain about, and I remember watching that and being going, I can see why people wouldn't like that. But I do think the size change ability was good for like placating the player base, but I don't think that Bahamut's size was as problematic as people were making out to be. I think he was being used as a scapegoat more than anything. Yeah, Akmon as Titan faces, that was the main complaint. That way you couldn't see his face and it's just a pillar of light and you had to guess. Who knows? Maybe... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say Mugi asked a good question.
Oh, let me get it back. Do you think Everlasting Flight will be made useful whatsoever during the course of Shadowbringers, even if it's for flavor? Seems both mechanically and from a design perspective odd that they'd make a literal level 80 spell effect pretty much worthless. If it becomes too good, then the situation where healers ask save Phoenix are more likely to happen.
That's what I mentioned earlier. It's sort of like either they don't make it useful and then it just kind of exists and you're like, okay, whatever, or they do, and then it's going to kind of create this sort of almost like toxic interaction where healers will want it for the heal, and then we're going to tell them we need to maintain our issue.
Oh, even if it's not a healing effect, that's also fair, I guess. Like, but what would it be? Oh god, I'm just thinking, what else does Phoenix do? Phoenix is fire. Oh, Phoenix now gives party-wide Phoenix Radiant Shield. No, Spikes
just gives Phoenix Blessing.
Phoenix Blessing, yeah, okay. That was something that I remember we were joking about with Eydis. It's like, Eydis already has the Phoenix experience with Phoenix Blessing and UCOB. A Phoenix Blessing could be actually like cool, even if it was just like a small percentage. Maybe it would push Summoner too far in the like raid DPS scenario, but flavorfully that would actually be kind of cool because Phoenix Blessing is a giant damage boost in the UCOB fight. But let's say Phoenix Blessing instead of Everlasting Flight was say like, I don't know, like a 2% bonus hypothetically, right? That would be kind of neat as long as Phoenix, and then you'd be more inclined to align Phoenix with synergy as opposed to for heals, which I hope doesn't ever happen. I don't know if, I mean, that would probably be a bit too strong, but I think it's definitely a fair consideration because it's kind of flavor for flavor's sake. But I don't know how you feel about the Phoenix regen. I think it's kind of whatever. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to treat it as if it doesn't even exist.
The one good thing is it doesn't seem to scale off mind, at least. For 20 potency, it does as much as a physic.
Yeah, and for only 20 potency as well, like probably pet scaled. So, hey, Summoner does get an int-based heal with Phoenix. Official forums, there you go. Here's your good heal. I don't know, but it pacifies the entire party for 5 seconds or more. Then healers would have to use Izuna, unless you make it so that Izuna doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, it could be interesting if like the weaker devotion was tied into it as like a Phoenix Blessing. I don't know, maybe that would be nice, but we still need to like evaluate how all the jobs are gonna fit together in terms of synergy and stuff before we start saying, hey, this would be fine and not too overpowered. Whereas like sometimes a little change can have big results, and that's something to be mindful of. You don't want like things to get too out of balance. At least I'd imagine that's the case of Square. Aspirations are one thing, how they execute it is a completely different thing. There are clearly cases where imbalanced things have been left to fester for however long, but there's definitely an interesting question to think about with Phoenix.
I have to read up the chat. Someone else asked something earlier.
So do you think Summoner will be easier to play as a result of all the changes?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. It will be easier in regards to executing Bahamut and Phoenix rotations since they are removing the off GCD requirement. So as opposed to before, and for those of you who had played like after 4.2, when we realized that spell speed would affect your Wormwind, it then became a point where you now had to memorize multiple rotations based on what your spell speed breakpoint was going to be, and that if 3 off GCD rotations would not work for you, you had to learn the 4 off GCD variants. And the 4 off GCD rotations definitely had a little bit more of like a difficulty curve in terms of properly executing it, because the windows you had for using your off GCDs were actually very, very strict. And so with all of that removed, it's certainly going to make that end of the rotation much easier. You just cast GCDs. That's all you have to worry about. In other ways, utilizing things like the guaranteed Rune 4 procs from Eggy Assaults, like that's going to obviously promote more critical thinking in terms of where you want to use your Rune 4 procs. Obviously, you want to minimize Ruin 2 as much as humanly possible. And so it gives you the opportunity to obviously look forward in terms of your rotation, know exactly where you need to weave, and then try to plan and execute your Eggy Assaults around around a timing where you can utilize it, actually weave your off GCDs efficiently, and not having to overuse Ruin 2. So like in that regard, it's definitely going to be a little harder in my opinion. But otherwise, it'll either be easier or just kind of like roughly the same, because as we mentioned before, with the way things are looking like currently, it's basically going to be a 2-minute rotation cycle as it is right now. So it doesn't really change much. It's just certain abilities either exist or they don't. They gave us new things, they took away others. So it's just, you know, the buttons that we actually hit may be a little different, but overall it's still going to feel, in my opinion, I think it's still going to feel pretty similar.
I'm looking forward to the increased incentive to just not press Ruin 2.
Yes, that would be nice, just having the GCD like optimization to consider. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted with Mugi mentioned a meme he made about like this is actually put into what we just said, the Ruin 2 overuse and GCD like efficiency in optimizing it. This is the meme he talked about. Someone we dubbed Grand Octet because of the octaweaves they were doing in Ukob, so it was extremely fitting. And Ziva has a fairly like, I don't want to say like overly strict, but it has like a default like weaving check where there are some exceptions it keeps in mind, and then if you infringe on it, like if you triple weave or if you hardcast Ruin into an oGCD, it's gonna like slap you on the wrist and say no, bad. 31 instances, and you see like the GCD uptime here, sub 90. Sub 90 is not good. Sub 90 is pretty bad. Like don't be sub 90 on a fight. Like this even accounts for downtime. Don't be sub 90. Like keep your GCD rolling, even with weaves, unless you're rushing and you need to rush oGCDs because you otherwise won't get them in. Like that's a core thing. That's fine, but like R2 overuse bad. Weaving too many oGCDs between R2 overuse, even worse. So please don't make Bahamut cry with this. Even if Kira logs is okay with it. Have green on Ziva for your uptime, and all will be good. Well, most things will be better, at least that way. But yeah, that harkens back to the whole optimizing GCDs, where if you can get 95% and your like GCD uptime is that bad with like weaving all over the place, and even your worm wave count isn't ideal. Like that to me, like I believe that those errors should amount to far more than they did, but they didn't because of like RNG. But we're gonna be in a timeline where those errors, that would probably be sub 90 for sure. Given that I also remember like what GCDs he used in this log. Excuse me. Like emphasizing good casting. We've needed that. We've needed that again. So yes, moving on, like, cast well. In that regard, like, that is one of the aspects where Summoner might get a bit harder again, and I'm okay with that, because push yourselves. Like, don't just settle for easiness. Like, if you're comfortable where you're at, push yourself more and like try and do even better. Like, never stop. I know that's something that Elevation is always like talking about, is you know, keep pushing yourself, never think that you're good, keep like making yourself even better. And there's that one like speech that you would link on YouTube.
Oh, I got plenty of them.
Yeah. But definitely, like, I want to see this, or this, and this, and this result in this. Like, ghosting meme-asides and whatnot, I don't want to see that happen on FFXIV. Like, that to me just invalidates the effort some people put in. I know it's, like, things out of one's control, but it's like, come on. Let people be more defined by skill than other factors. I think that should be the main defining factor. But anyway, I digress. Seeing what are the questions. Firebird Trance is actually at level 72. 74 is... I forget. Egis Assault. Yeah, Egis Assault. That's it. And then 76. I should know, but I'm starting to get a little tired myself.
Ruination, I think.
Yeah, the Ruination trait on Trisaster. And level 78 is Bane, and then 80 is Demi-Phoenix, and all that comes with it. Yeah, Milka's actually got a very fair point, and let me see if I can find...
Summoner optimizations are overrated.
Yes, let me find...
Sadly, there's truth to that.
Let me see. Oh shit, no, it's local host memes. This is secret sneak preview of a site that should have been released a long ass time ago, but I'm gonna have to change a bunch of things. I need to change like a bunch of the styling. Oh my god.
Oh yes, website. When is it releasing?
Soon TM. I'm like, I know it's been pushed back so many times, but a lot of
give us the secret here, Num. You got the date solved, right?
Oh, the secret here, right? And let me zoom in on the true hero. So this was 100 percentile number 1. I forget how long for, but it was lasting for quite a while. And I remember Sphere and other people being like, what the fuck is up with this log? Why are Milka's dots hitting so hard when he's using Titan Eggy? What the fuck? People were really salty that Milka had 100 percentile with Titan himself. And since then, Milka has done the memes of the Uwu Law Clear, where for every primal you're summoning the Eggy appropriate to them. So for Garuda, it's Garuda, Ifrit, it's Ifrit, and Titan is Titan. I forget what you do for Ultima, but yes. So Milka, like, no one in his group realized that he had Titan Eggy out, and he didn't realize until like the end. So I thought that was hilarious that, yes, Milka did get 100 percentile in Stormblood with Titan Eggy out, which you think shouldn't ever happen, but it just goes to show even suboptimal things can be obfuscated with like RNG and other facets. Excuse me. But yes. And then some other memes like this is Fright.
Oh man.
This is such a good video. I'm not gonna play it now, but I'm gonna have like a meme section. Like, I need to add more. There's also part 2 for the Fright one. I don't know if Fright's still in the chat, but this video is forever gonna be immortalized. Even if Mimi Miyazaki, the one and only, gets banned and doesn't like have YouTube videos. We should save this video so it doesn't get erased from the internet.
That right there, people, is why you don't get married.
Yes. He says.
Don't have you.
He says after getting engaged. So.
Hey, I didn't go through with the wedding. Right? Just saying.
Not yet, but I don't know if Suni is gonna be more serious if she says something like that. So.
Ooh. If she ever asks me to park her car.
Yes. But anyway, that's a little sneak teaser of Act Morning stuff and like guide stuff, BAS stuff. Like it's gonna show everything, but then you know, time rolls on, changes happen. So it's a little sneak preview like I've been working on for a long time, and I figure just sorry.
That good old guide that we wrote over a year ago.
I mean, we used the resources, you know, in it for like teaching people anyway, so it was still used, albeit indirectly. And like you know, have other resources like other docs, so could put like the UCOB doc and some other things. I need to like edit the styling of this, but one thing I also added is like a streamer page, so you could see like people in different. I need to add light and crystal, but you know, it actually shows. It means his name has changed. Yeah, so I can see myself. I'm streaming online. I need to edit the styling so it actually reads properly. I'm not on Exodus. Oh, you're on Cerberus? Okay. When I have time, I will edit these and I'll go through like everyone and check. But like even like if I click my lodestone link, you know, it will show that and stuff. So it's just something, because sometimes people want to know who's streaming on their data center and who they can be like inspired by. And most of the people I have here are caster players. There's Kefka. How do we get added to this? Just ask me and I'll add to the list. The site isn't live yet, but literally like either on my server or like DM me or pay me. I guess you could pay me. I'll be like Sundari Moto and accept a million gil. You know, just ask and I'll add. Upkeep is a bit annoying, especially like if people change servers, but just remind me if like things don't match up. Like Arthas is streaming right now. Arthas has more viewers than me. Feels bad. But yeah, that's one thing. Oh, Patango is Cecilia. And Cecilia is active in like summoner channels, but like quite a lot of faces in stream chat right now. Also like on this list because you know they're aware of these things and have talked with them before. But yeah, like if people want to be added to a streamer list, like when the site is live, I'd rather not ask before it's live. Just give me a heads up on like Discord and stuff. But yeah, there's like a lot of things that be added. Even has like an embed of Ziva that you can use. Although I actually recommend just going to the Ziva site itself as opposed to just using this because the window's kind of small. And then like something I've been working on I still need to finish is like I want to keep a record of changelog for summoner changes, so that way we have something to reference when it's like, hey, wasn't summoner doing this back then, or wasn't this changed like this? I notice a lot of the times people don't remember because looking up is awkward, especially when there's changes for a ton of other jobs. I even like started filling one out for yeah, like I have to use a web archive Wayback Machine for a 4.0 release. Yeah, it even details all the nerfs. So like this patch 4.2, shitty patch by the way. This patch was also a bit annoying with the Radiant Shield change. I never liked the justification for it, but like I'll do the same for 5.0 release 2, so I'll have a new category and then put like Shadowbringers and 5.0. But like here, I started adding them, and then I realized there's so many changes that in the end, everything just became physic. So I just added more rows that way. The LB Gen guide, I mean, I guess I can show that. It's not summoner specific, but let me like find it. Like I still need to like tweak a bunch, but and I also need to add Milka's clip. So like we talked about Physic and LB Gen a bit earlier, and like why the hell is Physic back in the game for 5.0? So if I go to like Summoner Physic, well, the heading no longer exists. That's a lie. Oh, let me fix that. So this
Someone asked, "Are you excited for 5.05 when they fix Trance again?" I can only hope.
That would be nice. That would be very, very nice. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would rather take a nerf and have it change to what we originally thought it was.
I would be liking that too. Like as much if it was the existing potencies, it would be too strong. Like I honestly thought like 1 minute with those potencies was over the top, but would feel really nice. But like a 1 minute cycle, but that was fairly seamless and like not as rigid. Like it'd still be fairly rigid because it's still a 1 minute cycle with the Dreadworm Trance, but instead of being like, oh, Firebird and Dreadworm share a cooldown, like it would be nice if they were mutually exclusive rather than dependent. But yes, you can see here like Summoner Physic. Let me actually make this bigger so it's more legible. So this was like about how like I was pitching this to Aisa in Entropy, and I'm like, hey Aisa, when are you gonna get Leaf to use Physic for LV Gen for your speedruns? And then Aisa just laughs at me and is like, that's never fucking happening. I can understand when people wouldn't want to use a non-DPS GCD, especially if it hurts them a pass, but here's the thing, right? Right now, provided Summoner Physic cast ensure filling LB bar. Like here's the important thing, and Milka was actually using this in UCOB for pushing UCOB speedruns, and do you still have the #1 clear right now for speed? Or has it been beaten? But I think like Milka's team GTL beat the #1 UCOB speed kill by 1 second, and apparently it was a clear that shouldn't have happened because a lot of nonsense did stuff. But like I don't know what memes, I haven't watched the full clear because I was away, but Milka would use Physic cheese to make LB Gen in Twintania more consistent. And, you know, that's a tool that Summoner can use in niche scenarios. But as I say here, it's not recommended for the general player or group. You have to know what the hell you're doing and making sure there's a good reason for it. But I also mentioned here, you know, I do not enjoy the fact that Weaker Heal GCD can be raid DPS correct to use over DPS Drop's core GCD in tandem with like the difference in Rune 2 and Rune 3. Thank fuck that's been addressed in 5.0. Like, this doc is no longer going to really be applicable because it's talking about all the different kinds of, like, LB cheese. Like, this one, by the way, needs to be fixed. If that isn't fixed in 5.0, I hope, like, I'm definitely posting about this. But, like, it's possible to generate LB2 out of combat. And you could pre-pull with LB2 instead of, like, a Ruin. This is stupid. This is, like, clearly unintentional, and I hope that that never happens again. But like I go into like depth between like critical health probably. Yeah, this one is the least known method of LB Gen, but there are clips about it, and when I like publish this doc you can read it. No, it's not public yet, but it will be soon, TM. Like I just need to like add a few more things and like fix like I haven't added like LB Gen for these the Kefka link. Okay, I can post the Kefka link in chat. But this is an Liz clip. You don't actually see like the party because Liz is like playing Pokemon or something. But you can just look at the LB bar and see the gains. Like this is a very funny clip, but also shows that how stupid LB can be. And you know, like as a 5% this should still be possible. And literally the one fix would be make it so that LB can only be generated in combat. Out of combat is stupid and should never be a thing. But other ones are like intentional and you know, level checker, weapons reframe ultimate, animal farm, and then it's like goes into the LB like passive mechanics. By the way, groups that argue that dupes are really bad for LB Gen have no idea what they're talking about as long as LB cheese exists. Yes, it hurts the passive tick, but you're not getting most of your LB from the passive ticks. You're getting most of your LB from like tank busters and tanks using like cooldowns. Because every time that happens, where is it? Like, you'll hear that shh noise every time like a tank is using cooldowns to survive something they otherwise wouldn't if they didn't. And yeah, surviving... Oh, I need to actually finish that. But surviving lethal is like 1,500 units instead of 600. It's ridiculous. It's like a ton. That's where you're getting a ton of your LB. It's not just from passive. Like, passive matters, but people who are like saying for Byakko farms, like, don't have dupes, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, stop worrying about stuff that really doesn't matter. And if you're not making checks because you can't, like, tank LV in time, or you can't pass the check normally, there are bigger problems that aren't LB related, and it's usually DPS related. I mean, in Byakko you could say actually mattered, but you could still just do it normally. You didn't just have to, like, cheese. Like, I'm not a fan of like tank LB cheeses. I know some people are like, it's creative and stuff, but I don't like the fact that you can obliviate mechanics. Mechanics aren't there to do them. I guess that's true. But yeah, I actually like cover a bit about how pugs have been using like LB3 to like with tank LB3 to survive twins or red fists and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not a fan of that. But sorry, I've rambled a bunch about LV because Milka did ask if I could show like the doc. I don't know, have I shown like any of this to either of you? I think I showed like the physic one to you both, like the physic part.
Yeah, I remember saying it before.
Yeah, it will be like released eventually. But what I'll end up doing is I've got a subdomain for theoryjerks.com, and I'll put all of these docs and all of our other docs, like Math Wizard docs, on theoryjerks.actmorning.com, which is another reason to like finish the site. But yes, I've rambled on quite a bit. Are there any things that either of you would like to close with, or any thoughts to express?
I just want to play the game.
Sorry.
I just want it to come out and I want to hit the dummy.
Yeah, I hear that.
Same to be.
I hear that. It won't be long now. Like, I think a month will pass pretty damn quickly, and I just hope the Bahamut that there is no Ralban Extreme. Like, I will actually be both sad and extremely humid if, come expansion launch, all of their efforts for splitting the data centers still resulted in the same problems because their server infrastructure is not good. If that's still...
Well, we had DDoS the other day, so...
Yeah, there's DDoSes, and the Euro DCs have been suffering a ton, like... Yeah... Like, I don't know, like, what Square Enix will be saying, like, what Yoshida will say, like, all this effort, and then it doesn't matter, and then they're trying to make it so that you have 8 cross-world link shells, which is going to put more strain on the interactions between all the servers, and then God knows what. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing as well. Like, I was on a break for 4 months, and now, you know, I've come back doing a bit of UCOB and stuff, and I'm looking forward. I'm excited for the next expansion. Excuse me.
Nem needs that UCOB clear before 5.0.
Feels bad.
He needs to be the golden boy that he was born to be.
I do. I really do. I mean, if things go well with the group, like, I won't, like, mind if I don't, because I've already accepted that, you know, time is a bit of a crunch. But, if things go well with the group, then fingers crossed. If they don't, I'm fine with it not. Don't need a golden weapon when you're already gold yourself, so that's what I like to think anyways, a gold dragon. But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you both for being here and participating in the discussions. I hope it was informative for all of you watching. I hope you're excited and looking forward to Summoner or any of the other jobs. Expansion time is definitely always very hype. And, you know, fingers crossed, everything goes well. And in Square Enix place, all our hopes. And, yeah, thank you for tuning in for Akmons and Revelations. Thank you, and good night.